So, you wish to know of us. You wish to know what drives us. What makes us who we are. What makes us different to our brother Astartes. I can tell you this very simply. It is in our faith. It is in our vows. They are for, and they are thus. Suffer not the unclean to live. Uphold the honor of the emperor. Abhor the witch. Destroy the witch. Accept any challenge, no matter the odds. So we all have sworn, so we all do. For none have ever broken these oaths in 10,000 years of our eternal crusade, and none ever will. For we are the right hand of the God Emperor. We are his purest sons. We are his punishment. We are his vengeance. The Black Templars. Welcome, gentle listener. I'm Voldemort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions and forces of the Warhammer 40k universe. I pray you will forgive me for the vigor of this video, but it is not impossible to brook this subject without a modicum of reflected zeal. Do also please bear in mind that this is an introduction only. I will release more entries on this chapter as I am able. At this point, I would like to mention that I have done some entries on Rogal Dorn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, from which the Black Templars are descended. If you have not seen it and do not know of the life of Rogal Dorn, it may be a good time to put this video on pause and check that out whilst painting or pottering. It would lend more context to that which we discussed today. Now, with the extensive throat clearing performed, let us get into the heart of the matter. Today, let us explore the history, legacy, and character of one of the most dangerous and fanatical of the forces at the Emperor's command. Let us explore the Black Templars.
Hey, Lisa. I'm alright. We're doing 40k lore.
What is your life?
Hey, Vader.
My honor is my life. What is your fate? My duty is my fate. What is your fear? My fear is to fail. What is your reward? My salvation is my reward. What is your craft? My craft is death. What is your pledge? My pledge is eternal service. What is your duty? To serve the Emperor's will. What is the Emperor's will? That we fight and die. What is death? It is our duty. Of all of the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, this is perhaps one of the only two successor chapters that have managed to outshine and become more popular with the fanbase than their originating legion. But it is not difficult to see why. For in all the galaxy there are few forces, Xenos, Imperial, or Chaos, that can liquidize the bowels of their enemy, so much as even the whispered mention of this glorious chapter. The Black Templars are the Emperor's wrath made manifest, but they do not rely on a curse of Khorne to do so, as the Blood Angels do. They do not rely on the forces of witchcraft and warp manipulation, as the Grey Knights are verily designed to do. Nor do they have a genetic predisposition to berserk rages or canine attributes, as the Space Wolves do. They rely on will, faith, and courage alone. The Black Templars are fanatics of a level that would impress, if not intimidate, even the Adeptus Sororitas. They are the clenched fist of the Emperor. They are the wide cold anger of their father, Rogal Dorn. They are the thing the Chaos worshippers fear. They are the burning brand, the righteous chainsaw, the blessed bomb.
What gave it away? I don't know what would have given you that impression, Vader. It's not like they're terrifying or anything. I think I'm gonna cover rogal dorn, on the next one. Because to really understand the Black Templars, you really need to understand rogal dorn, which is their Primarch. rogal dorn was a badass. And, it would explain a lot, I think. Love them. They're great. Well, we gotta slot the Space Wolves. Enough jabbering. But see, rogal dorn, I think, is Black Templars, because I think I'm gonna do that next and kind of do it in bits and pieces here and there. So a bit of this and then give a bit of that, so you can kind of put everything together. But today it's Black Templars because I feel like Black Templars. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. Just this is what I want to do.
Bolter, they are the men who purge all that is unclean. Woe to the mutant, the heretic, and most especially the traitor, should they be in the path of the eternal crusade of the Black Templars. For the Black Templars have never known lasting defeat. They have never bowed to pressure, and they have never simply obeyed best. They are... Now, gentle listener, let us explore why they are so different to their colors of the other chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. For this, we must go back over 10,000 years. We must go back to the very beginning of the chapter, and the darkest period in human history. We must revisit the horror of the Horus Heresy. Only by doing this can we begin to understand the certain drives that have propelled the chapter through the many millennia that have come after. We must go back to the very beginning, so we can understand the righteous rage that is within the souls of the Space Marines who wear the black and white of the Templars.
Yeah, I'm not coloring each individual fucking flower. I'm not doing it. I'm not.
So, let's
If I
begin.
do, I'll go back and do it. But
the Emperor of Mankind, or Master of Mankind, then arose of huge sizes, most being over 8 feet tall. All had multiple organs that were added to them over time, making them into true post-humans and the most lethal biological human force the galaxy had ever seen. These soldiers were called the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Space Marines. Originally, there were 20 legions, each taken from the genetic template of a being more akin to a demigod than a man, beings called Primarchs. They were to be the generals of the Emperor's armies, a job they were not only forged to perform, but did so with aplomb. Each a titan on the battlefield, in the command tent, and in personal combat, with abilities as far beyond their genetic sons as the Marines were above standard humanity. With these crusading armies, led by their godlike fathers, the forces of humanity could not be stopped. They went out into the galaxy and conquered, liberated, and pacified the vast majority of the Milky Way. When final victory seemed in sight, the Emperor of Mankind left his most able son, Horus Lupercal, in charge of the end of the endeavor. The Master of Mankind returned to Terra, what we now call Earth, and took up his most secret project. A trial so secret that he did not even inform his sons of his intentions or his labors, their goals or expected results. It was a mistake that would change the course of human history forever. When the Emperor had left the Great Crusade, his sons, the Primarchs, fell to petty bickering, and the son here the furthest reaches of the galaxy. He set traps so that they could be removed from the picture. When enough had been done, Horus Lupercal finally turned his cloth and declared himself an open rebellion and attacked all of the facility. Dorn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, and all of their armies for the better part of a decade. But eventually, inexorably, they fought their way to the birthplace of humanity, the throne world of the Emperor, Terra. Rogal and two of his loyal brother Primarchs, Jagatai and Sanguinius, were all that were able to be present to defend the Holy Palace on Terra against twice, if not thrice, their numbering Primarchs and their legions of Astartes. Also, their adversaries had the corrupting powers of chaos on their side, and thus were able to summon hordes of demons. Was the father of the Imperial Fists. They were taken from his job, and were of a similar temperament, mind, and steel as he. And it's from Astartes, these Space Marines, that the Black Templars were taken. Now we must go into one particular nuance, another titan, another legend of the age of which we speak. It is the man, the Marine, called Sigismund. In a time of legends, where the Emperor and the Primarchs bestrode the galaxy like deities, where the ranks and numbers of the Space Marines were at their very zenith, and their deeds were worthy of epic poem and bardic song, there was one who outshone all of his brothers and cousins, Sigismund. It is often said that with the exception of the Primarchs and the Emperor himself, there has never been a more lethal and skilled human to grace the entire human race. During the Great Crusade, his name was hailed as the mightiest and a peerless jewel that adorned his legion. This was to be proven beyond any shadow of doubt when the heresy reached its crux moment during the Siege of Terra. Sigismund fought during the entire heresy for his legion, the Seventh, the Imperial Fists. He was the first captain of the legion and its greatest light. When Rogal, Dorn, Sanguinius, and the Emperor left the palace by teleportarum to take the fight to Horus on the very bridge of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, Sigismund was one of those left behind. He was left behind to lead. He did so from the front. Sigismund was granted the best armor and weaponry that could be gained, and then tasked to act as the Emperor's own champion. He was to represent the Emperor in the defense of the palace. As the champion, he was to locate and confront the leaders and heroes of the sieging army of his brother Astartes, the traitors. In this function, he challenged over a score of Chaos champions, demons, and twisted Marine officers. He dispatched them all in short order, nor did he do so with bolter or plasma gun trickery or traps. Every single last one of them was challenged, confronted, and defeated in personal combat. Blade to blade, steel to steel. He brought all low with his courage, faith, and skill alone. His ability was only ever outshone by his conviction and faith. With these attributes combined in this role, he was unstoppable. When Horus had been slain by the Emperor, which is a tragic tale I will explain on another day, the forces of chaos broke and fled. What followed was a war that saw all loyalist forces of the Imperium chase the traitors across the galaxy, inflicting defeat upon them. The traitors were hounded remorselessly into a tear in real space that led to the realms of the war, called the Eye of Terror. This campaign was called the Scouring, and Sigismund was one of the loyalist warriors that was inflamed with zeal, ever in the vanguard of every battle fought by his legion. But it was never enough. Rogal, Dorn, and all of his sons, the Imperial Fists, would never forgive themselves for what they construed as their failing in allowing the Emperor to be crippled that day on the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit. Thus, their own self-loathing was enshrined within their breasts, and led to a cold rage that could never be satisfied, never be slacked or sated. When this was done, civil war loomed again, when Reboot Gulliman supplanted Rogal as the head of the Loyalist armies, and dictated that the legions should be broken into lesser units of only 1,000 Astartes, called chapters. Rogal and his son, Sigismund, would not countenance this horror, this infamy. Rogal declared Gilliman a coward, But when naval forces began to engage Imperial Fist vessels because of their rebellion against the dictator Robert Gilliman, civil war loomed again. Alas, rogal had to decide between compliance or another civil war. A civil war that the human race might not survive. rogal Dorn knew his sons would never willingly comply, so purposefully he led them into a massacre arranged by their worst enemies, the Iron Warriors' traitor legion. The trap was called the Iron Cage, a perfect maze of fortifications arranged for that one purpose only: the destruction of the Imperial Fists. The butchery was great, and only few Marines survived. rogal sacrificed his very sons to the altar of Robert Gilliman's Codex Astartes, his writ, his new order. With only enough Marines left to form very few chapters, so great had been the toll taken by the Iron Cage, there were not enough Marines left for any form of rebellion. Thus, rogal achieved his goal, the aversion of a second civil war, for his men were broken. All but one: Sigismund. The remnants of the Imperial Fist Legion were broken into chapters of 1,000 men, but only few. One, the Imperial Fists, were made up of rogal Dorn's veterans. The Crimson Fists were made up of the youngest and most hopeful sons. There were others, but records differ, for it has been over 10,000 years since this event, and they will gain their own entries in the future. The last chapter to be formed was to be made up out of the most zealous, the most fanatical, the most aggressive of all of the sons of rogal. There could never be any doubt who would lead this chapter. It was Sigismund. My tabard, the white of sun-bleached bone, offers a stark contrast to the blackened and black plate beneath. The heraldic cross stands proud on my chest, where Astartes of lesser chapters wear the Emperor's aquila. We do not wear his symbol. We are his symbol. Reclusiac Grimaldus of the Hell's Reach Crusade. Sigismund showed lip service to the Codex Astartes for a period, but was driven by a fire that few could even conceive, let alone match, and his plans and pathways soon permitted him more leeway. For if Sigismund forged his chapter now, he alone. He was unfettered by convention and precedent, and no longer had his melancholy and stern father to gainsay him in any decision. Thus Sigismund forged a weapon that reflected his own character, his own drive. Thus was the fire of zeal lit, a fire that has never dimmed in all the long millennia of the Imperium. Thus were the Black Templars formed. When they were forged, Sigismund reinstated his vows as champion of the Emperor, and then expanded on them. Thus were the 4 great vows of the Black Templars taken by the entire chapter, and have been retaken by every leader, officer, or initiate of the Templars ever since. Abhor the witch. Smite now the scions of the witch. Grant us the strength to pierce their unclean flesh, to cover their fields with the pale forms of their blasphemous dead, to drown the thunder of guns with the shrieks of their dying, to lay waste to their citadels with hurricanes of fire, to wring the hearts of their kin with unavailing grief, to send them into the wastes of their desolate lands, in rags and hunger, broken in spirit, worn with travail, and begging for the refuge of the grave. We ask it in the spirit of wrath, O Master of mankind. Black Templars vow: abhor the witch, destroy the witch. Lead us from death to victory, from falsehood to truth. Lead us from despair to hope, from faith to slaughter. Lead us to his strength and an eternity of war. Let his wrath fill our hearts, death, war, and blood. In vengeance, serve the Emperor and the name of Dawn. Suffer not the unclean to live. Prayer and vow of the Black Templars. Trust in the Emperor at the hour of battle. Trust him to intercede that his word is true as they do death on alien soil. Turn their seas to red with the blood of their slain. Crush their hopes. Honor of the Emperor. Vow of the Black Templars. O Emperor, in wrath rejoicing at bloody wars, fierce and untamed, whose mighty power doth make the strongest walls from their foundations shake. All-conquering master of mankind, be pleased with this war's tumultuous roar. Delight in swords and fists red with alien blood and the dire ruins of savage battle. Rejoice in furious challenge and avenging strife, whose works with woe embitter human life. Accept any challenge, no matter the odds. Prayer and vow of the Black Templars. With these vows in place, the Templars are very unlike any of their brothers and cousins in other chapters of Space Marines. They do use heavy weapons and ordnance, as they are not idiots, but the use of devastation squads is far more limited. They are in fact a rarity due to the vows, due to the second vow. But sometimes even the Templars need to use heavy weapons to clear away particular foes. As stated, they are fanatics, but they are not idiots. Another main difference in their organisation and deployment on the field of battle is how they intake and train their forces. The vast majority of Astartes chapters follow the Codex Astartes, the Tomb of Tactics and Organisation written by Reboot Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. In said treatise, the Astartes are directed to take Marines into their scout companies at first. These companies are grounds for training and for gaining experience before the younger Marine joins the battle line proper. When scout training has concluded, they are then funneled into tactical squads, who are armed mostly with bolters, but are capable of meeting most threats. They are the backbone of a chapter, as these squads do contain a heavy weapon and specialist equipment, but only few, so the unit has incredible tactical flexibility. Marines will then progress to more specialised roles in either close assault units or heavy weapons units. From there, they progress to the first company and become one of the veterans of the chapter, if they are deemed worthy, by dint of their heroism and skill in decades of combat. This regimen and pathway is utterly ignored by the Black Templars. There is much to be said for the way that the Templars train their Marines, for a reason I will go into in a moment. Templar candidates who are recruited from worlds they pass on their unending crusades are, as with other chapters, put through incredibly grueling testing. But from there, the similarity ends. For Black Templars are not placed in scout companies. The Templars do not own such things. They believe that training and the acquisition of the metal needed to be counted amongst the number of the Black Templars comes only from direct field experience and the fires and fury of battle. So when a candidate becomes an Astartes, their biological changes and enhancements complete, they become a neophyte. Every neophyte is then taken on as a futuristic squire to a more experienced Templar, known as an initiate. These initiates are actually fully paid-up members of the Templars. They will personally train the neophyte in all aspects of war. They will take them into battle at their side and give them the most harsh and brutal initiation into the life of a frontline Templar, charging into the midst of the heart of the enemy in their very first sally. Thus do Templars gain on-the-spot training and a baptism of fire that sees a tragically high number of them left scattering battlefields across the galaxy in their hundreds and thousands. The death toll in the Black Templars is excruciating compared to the statistics of others. But those Templars who are finally deemed to have worth and shown true faith, tenacity, fury, and ability are then some of the most rugged and able of all Space Marines. Thus, the tactical squad does not exist for the Black Templars. They call these squads, made up of experienced initiates and their neophyte squires, crusade units. Nor are they regimented and organised into pretty orders of battle that other adherents to the Codex Astartes must arrange. For in the Black Templars, one fights at the side of those one wishes to fight at the side of, and this can change. Thus, Crusader units are not forced or created by some bureaucratic rule. No. They are formed by colleagues of like-minded Astartes, merely organising themselves into units to meet threats. In this way, the Black Templars are far more flexible and amazingly driven. They see a threat and meet the challenge, any challenge, head-on. They do not have a designated sergeant in charge of a Crusader unit, as they are all of one mind and one purpose. They are simply not needed. These seemingly small differences to their brothers of chapters who follow the Codex Astartes can cause issues when they are deployed amongst larger campaigns. So the Black Templars attempt to make sure that they are in such force and such numbers that collaboration is simply not required. Although they will never refuse a call for assistance from a brother chapter, they will do so on their own terms, and will not yield command or control to those who follow what they consider the dogmatic and inflexible structures, tactics, and strategies employed by the Codex Astartes. Simply put, the Black Templars fight their way, or not at all. Due again to the second oath, there is much less emphasis placed on the training and accuracy with a bolt gun or rifle that is usually one of the defining factors of an Imperial Fist successor chapter. For the Black Templars, the oaths are living, breathing things and may never, ever be avoided, even if this would mean they lose an encounter. Thus, the emphasis of training and combat ability is almost exclusively funneled into peerless ability with close combat weaponry. Only the Blood Angels in the midst of a Black Rage, or the Sons of Lehman Russ, the Space Wolves, could hope to come close to the close quarters potentials of a Black Templar. But even then, it would be a close run thing. When an
Okay. So that's a lot to take in. But let me give you a side quest. Or a little bit of helpful information. The Black Templars operated on a very medieval mindset or fighting style. The use of the word squire is very much what it sounds like. It's back in the Middle Ages. There were knights, which would be the equivalent of a Templar, and then the knights would have squires who would join them on the field of battle. You can have page or squire. Page is beneath a squire, typically. Otherwise, like an errand boy, a squire is a knight in training. If that helps and understand the relationship or the dynamics there. Your squire you are in charge of is like a knight in the Middle Ages in charge of their squire. And you are their squire until you reach knighthood. And a lot of the time, you take on attributes of your knight as a squire, or you would have back then. And a lot of the time, the knight would choose you based on mindsets or compatibility, really, because you're going to be with that person for potentially a very long time. And you need to take that into consideration when choosing a squire. because a squire is not like I'm going to take you on for a day or two kind of commitment. A squire is years of commitment to that person. And a brotherhood you really couldn't understand unless you've been in it. And to understand this, you really need to research squires and knights. And another thing I thought I would help give some context for is the fighting styles of the Templar would be referred to in the Middle Ages as melee, which would have been close quarters combat, which would have meant a sword, a shield, axe, melee weapons were typically that. Now that could range from anywhere like a throwing axe or a battle axe, and they're two completely different things. Or a long sword, short sword with two short swords. They would call dual wielding is actually called Florentine. That would also be considered melee. So the Black Templars would have been primarily melee warriors. Now they had firepower. They had guns and bolsters and bolters, and they had explosives and rockets, what have you. They had artillery. But their primary weapons of choice were melee. Just to give some points of clarification. Maybe that helps. Maybe it's useless information, but there it is nonetheless.
Initiate is deemed to have served with colossal honor. Then they are permitted to join the Order of Sword Brethren, the Codex equivalent of the Veteran. From there, should they survive decades or even centuries of close combat with the most vile and unspeakable creatures in the galaxy, or from the warp, can they be promoted to leadership? But this is always dead man's shoes, as with other chapters.
A good way to put it.
The most significant difference in the Templar fold. 1. They do not have a home planet or planets from which they draw their aspirants, those who would be Space Marines. Black Templars robustly recruit from every last world they cleanse, save, or pass. Their need for new warriors is a hunger that cannot be satisfied, as their war is never ending. 2. The Black Templars are the only chapter or organization that have kept the fires of the original crusade alight. But the Black Templars have taken oaths that they will never tire, they will never stop, they will never relent until the entire Milky Way galaxy is free from the taint of the Xenos, the mutant, the witch, and the traitor. Thus they live and breathe, move and die aboard vast crusade fleets. The crusade for them never ended. The Black Templars also use this practice to flagrantly ignore the limits on the number of Astartes and Space Marines that can be kept under the one banner, the one chapter. It is said that the only one person in all of the Imperium who knows how many Templars there are is the High Marshal of the Black Templars. No others. It is true that the attrition rate among the chapters is eye-watering, but their intake is organized to more than make up for this rate. More than. Hence, it is suspected by many that the Black Templars, if gathered in one place, could potentially equate to the numbers that could only be described as a full legion. It is known that inquisitors or nosy bureaucrats of the administratum would take too close an interest in the requisition of materials. Those who attempt to truly discern the numbers of the Templars are often likely to have lethal accidents. The Templars do not tolerate any interference in their activity. None whatsoever, for they see their mandate as coming from the Emperor himself, and bow to none but he. But a full muster of the entire Black Templars has never, and probably never will, happen. For the Black Templar Crusade fleets are in most parts of the galaxy, bringing the fire of wrath and the light of purity to all regions that they deem to require them, which is all regions. For the heretic, the witch, the Xenos, and the traitor know no shame and respect no boundaries. So thus the endless crusade must follow them and root them out wherever they rear their foul heads. Many disagreement has occurred betwixt the Templars and the local lords of the region, but the Templars do not ever care to take any heed. For if the local lords had been doing their job, as the Emperor has decreed, then their presence would not be required. Thus, if their presence is required, then the local lord, chapter, or militarum are beneath contempt, for they have failed. When a region is pacified, the crusade will then go on, but they also can leave training camps on planets at their discretion. If this happens, then the initiates will take their neophytes into combat as before, but locally. This usually only occurs when a region has been cleansed, but the Templars know that it will not remain so, for evil is always obstinate, and never knows when it is beaten. Thus, there are centers of Templars across the galaxy, as well as the main strength of the various crusading fleets. One can only wonder exactly how many of them there are. What dire need, what terrible threat might be required for the High Marshal to give the clarion call to resound so fiercely across the entire galaxy that he would recall every last one to a muster. The thought alone is terrifying. So we get onto one of the most important elements of the Black Templars: faith. In the long years of the original Great Crusade, there was a simple truth to which all of humanity was to be illuminated. What the Emperor demanded be promulgated: the Imperial Truth. The Imperial Truth was very simple, but will require full entry in the future to cover its nuances. For the now, you only need to know its basics. The Imperial Truth stated that there were no gods, that religion itself was one of the greatest enemies of humanity, and any religion was a lie. There were no spirits, there was no afterlife, and there was no God. Most chapters of the Adeptus Astartes still adhere to the Imperial Truth, but this is not so of the Black Templars. The Templars have replaced the Imperial Truth with one of their own, and many of their peers sneer at this change. The Templars are of the ardent belief that the Emperor of mankind is, in fact, the god of humanity. This is no hyperbole, no lip service, and no whimsy. They believe this with every fibre of their being. Any aspirant who does not allow this faith to infuse every aspect of their mind, heart, and soul will be rejected, no matter how adept or how much potential they may have in any or all other disciplines of war, no matter how they could be a shining light to adorn the chapter. If they cannot take the faith of their Emperor's godhead into them, then they will be rejected. The faith of the Black Templars is terrifying, literally. They are warriors who have been charged by their god, the Emperor, to strike enemies. They believe that he watches them at all times. As omniscient, they believe that he has the power to intervene, as he is omnipotent, as any good god should be. But he does not do so, as they are his champions. Each Black Templar believes that every action, every deed, every moment, they represent the God Emperor of mankind. This religious fervour has built them into a force that is nigh on unstoppable. Where others would perform a tactical withdrawal, where others would seek to regroup and redeploy to better confront a superior foe, the Black Templars not only stand firm, they push forward. I have stated before that the casualty rate amongst the chapter is unprecedented, for this is one of the reasons why. Their drive to face enemies blade on blade, no matter any disparity of size or power, is one factor, but their unquenchable zeal is the other. They do not run. They do not cower behind walls or parapets. They do not allow for long sieges or protracted bombardments of placements. They charge. One might say this is foolhardy at the very minimum, but it has been their way for over 10,000 years and will never change. They do not throw lives away, gentle listener, but they just construe any challenge whatsoever as one to be met head-on, and can be goaded or led into traps with comparative ease. Those who do manage to lead the bully of the chapter into a trap often find that they have woefully underestimated the mettle of their victims. The amount of times that a Black Templar force has made a trap into a massacre is uncountable. For those thinking that they have trapped the Black Templars often find that they are the ones caught in a slaughterhouse as the dauntless fanatics tear through their number like a hot breeze through corn. Anyone wishing to attempt to trap the Black Templars had better be prepared for the fight of their lives, for usually it is their last. The fanaticism of the Templars to their faith has other effects. Although once, long ago, they are recorded to have had psykers amongst their number, this is no longer true, and has not been for some time. Definitely a tale for another time, though. Ever since, they have not only been without psyker support, they have actively refused to fight alongside any force that contains what they consider a witch. There is only one exception to this rule. One, the Grey Knights. As the Grey Knights are the direct progeny of the Emperor, their genesis is the genome of the Emperor himself, not a Primarch. They are deemed to be the only psykers that the Black Templars will tolerate on the same field of combat as they. The zeal of the Black Templars is such that over time it is proved to seep into their very weapons and equipment of war, as mad as that may seem. There are reports that the very machine spirits of some Land Raider Crusaders, huge battle tanks with troop transport capacity, has been affected by the constant exposure to the Black Templars, so much so that it has infected them. More than one report of a vehicle's machine spirit impatience for the fray has led to them being discovered in the camp of an enemy, the vehicle itself going forward and exterminating everything in an enemy camp while the Black Templars were at prayer before the fray. Although other chapters or organizations would look in horror at this form of independence of action and activity, the Templars laud the vehicle for its righteous anger, its wish to serve the Emperor more directly. Also, it is a sign of their power and faith that despite having no psychic ability whatsoever, the Templars can disrupt the powers of the warp that may assail them. Their faith in the Emperor is quite literally a shield from the powers of corrupting bodies and the bolts and blasts of the witch alike. They are not immune to the mightiest of psykers, but the untrained or weak, or distracted or overconfident, has often sneered at a Black Templar and extended their hand to electrocute or annihilate them, only to find their vaunted powers fizzle as the knight rams a blade through their chest. Truly, for the Black Templars, the Emperor protects. Black Templars are, however, so zealous that they can leave a bloody wake. For no psyker, mutant, abhuman, or suspected traitor will ever be left to infect the Imperium as a whole. The wiping out of all life from a planet can be a regular punishment decreed by the Templars. One could not count the millions of humans that have been slain by the Templars in their cause, but one must always remember their history and their goal to understand how such seeming callousness can be done in the name of the Emperor. For the Black Templars, they will never forget the Horus Heresy. The population of a world of billions must be weighed against the survival of the entire Imperium, and trillions. They have witnessed personally and regularly how the machinations of just one powerful cycle or demon can drag an entire sector and hundreds of worlds into a hell. Better to prune the rose bush and have it healthy than to allow a rot, any rot, to spread. With the stakes so high, the Black Templars will never shy away from any task, no matter how brutal, no matter how terrible it is to perform. For they are the hand of the Emperor. They are his champions, at least in their minds. Also, the oaths remove any and all chance of working with alien races, what the Imperium calls Xenos, no matter how common cause may be in play. It is with stunned confusion and rage that many an Eldar army has expected the forces of humanity to join them in a raging battle against chaos, only to find that the Black Templars will charge both sides at the same time. The Black Templars give no quarter, ever, for no reason whatsoever, will a champion of the Emperor, a Black Templar, ever meet or treat or suffer the Xenos to live. It is at this point that I must conclude my introduction to the Black Templars. To go further would take us down a veritable plethora of extensive rabbit holes. But rest assured, gentle listener, I shall revisit I am his sword. I am his honor. I am his revenge. On the dawn before our battle, I awoke, but stayed in a dreamlike state. For my very soul was afire, my mind the receptacle of his might, his vision. He has chosen me to be his vessel. He shows me the images of the deeds I must perform, the foes he has chosen for me to bring low. My eyes dart from one vision to the next, the dizzying kaleidoscopic vista of futures. All is in flames. All is sin and degradation. And so he sends me. But he points the way. He shines his light into the darkness and the depths of the souls of these wretches. He shows me who I must defeat in his name. For on this day, I am his sword. I am his honor. I am his revenge. I am the Emperor's champion. Launched from the depths of our ship, our Cathedral of the Void, our battle barge, we hurtle through the skies. 10 of us locked into the walls of a cylindrical missile, a drop pod, each an Astartes, a space marine. Our power armor black, anointed, holy. A gift from our grandfather, a second skin of ceramite we can feel as well as the first. Our black carapace permits this. Many wear power armor, not all even human, but it is only we, his angels of death, that feel it like it is our own body. We who harness its full power. Our ship fires down a spread of shot to soften the area, is how they will feel or construe it, if they have but one tactically gifted mind amongst them. This may be true of other chapters, other sons of other lineages. Not so for the sons of Sigismund, the never-ending crusade. For us, the fire is to drive the foe toward our landing site. Our drop pods will destroy more on our arrival, but it also means that they will be herded in around us. There will not need to be a headlong initial charge against a wall of guns many times the bodies we have. No time for them to bring up their heavier weaponry. No distance for them to take aim and swallow their fear and pull a trigger. No delay. We will be amongst them from the instant our doors come down, and when we are amongst them, they cannot use their firepower. Hence we will thresh them, Mow them down before the dual fire of our faith and our hatred. Our chainswords are chained to our arms, for the neophytes and initiates. The sword brethren here has his power sword thus locked. All are stood stock still while we plough through the skies downward, ever downward. I am the odd man out. I am not in their crusade squad, compromising 2 drop pods full of Astartes. But this is the only place open, and it is right and proper that I will be the first out of the door, the first to engage the enemy. Fire starts to whip past us, but little. My stomach slams into my throat as the thrusters fire at the very last second, sending massive plumes of fire and thrust at the ground. It makes our impact slightly less jarring, but it would still shatter every bone in the body of any normal mortal. After 2 swift successive chimes, the doors are blown off, leaving us 5 doorways to exit. I'm the first to disengage their holding anchors, the first to the door, the first to leap out. The other benefit of the thruster fire is that there is a blast zone around us of some 10 paces. Scores of burning and blasted forms lay there, a cull of the foes from our advent alone. My mind does not even register the charred stench so akin to swine on a spit. I'm amongst them before the first has even drawn his weapon fully out. They are packed around us, as was intended, and I begin my charge through them. My paces are swift but measured, my stance perfected over 100 battles. I see all before me, to the side of me, and snatch glimpses while performing my dance. Instinctively, without conscious thought, my mind maps the next 3 strikes encounters. The man I will kill, the way his body will fall, how it will open me to the high stance attack of the next, but how I can block and then run him through and onto another that is directly behind him. The foe are rabble, slime, only human. They are malnourished, but insane, poorly armed with makeshift melee weapons, but filled with the power of their dark masters. The claws of chaos dug into their souls as much as their clearly corrupted bodies. They will not break easily. I continue my march of doom, slaying all who come before me. My brothers are behind me, but not with me. I'm not in their squad. I am the Emperor's champion. My role is separate. I lead by example. My targets require I arrange the field as I wish, as the Emperor commands it, where he leads. But for now, I see the initiates leading their neophytes into the encircling cultists just behind my wake. The other pod landed a split second behind ours, more landing all over the drop zone, as per the plan of attack. The Crusader squad started with 19 members, each a pair of master and squire, and the sword brethren who leads them, of course. Not that the men need leading. We know what we must do. The 2 score of us clear the enemy in less than 2 minutes, never stopping, never ceasing, never showing mercy, never showing doubt. Even the neophytes take at least 2 score each before we are done, and they finally stop rushing our lines. The last of them turning and charging back to the central hab block, no doubt telling themselves that they go to warn their masters, instead of that they run from justice. They run from the ire of the Emperor. The landing ground is secure ahead of schedule. As I wait for the Storm Raven to come down, I note that we have lost 3 neophytes. 2 slain in melee, the last I see beheaded by a sneering, cold-eyed initiate. The neophyte had frozen. He had then whimpered. Sometimes we get one. I'm never sure how, but sometimes we do. Nonetheless, he is gone. I hear sounds of battle all around me. Streaks of missiles and darts of laser light flash across the skies from building to building. The Storm Raven comes in. It swoops down and then hovers for half a minute only, before it is gone. Out of the ramp drops the 2 Inquisitors and their entourages. Saurat Brachus and his force are first. Saurat is tiny, entirely covered by his men. Sloth, the towering Ogrim with slab shield. His Crusader Knight stands to his other side, shield held high, as is Sloth's. Behind them are Sororitas and a Ministorum priest with a sword already revving, Ordo Hereticus. We have fought alongside them many times. He has a good nose for the heretic, the traitor, the witch. He leads us to them. The other group seem less comedic. Ordo Malleus, the demon hunters. An older man jumps out, their Inquisitor. He is special, some say, one of an elect group within the orders, but I ignore rumor, and thus have no real knowledge of them, nor do I care. as long as they are here to destroy the enemies of the Emperor. He has an older marine with him. I can see it in his reactions. But what is this? His black painted armor covers the white that was clearly once on his shoulder. The chain from his sword to his arm. This Inquisitor has a black Templar with him. Or a pretender. I know not which. A younger bald man, eyes bright, darting from one place to another in quick succession. He looks handy for a human. He stands with his lord like a wolf, about to be unleashed. Mechanicus priest is with him, and what looks very much like an assassin. Bodysuit, intricate and rare weaponry. It can be none other. The boy with the eyes is slapped over his bald pate by his lord, like a child being cuffed to get out of a parent's way. It is the sneer that covers the face that makes me think that this is not an avuncular gesture. The Inquisitor seems peevish, but dauntless. His armor is old, power armor though it may be. Old, and of a design I've never seen before. The benefit of a status as a special or elect Inquisitor of some sort. No matter. As soon as they land, our Crusader squads form around them, and we push forward. Before us is a tangled web of hab blocks with walkways betwixt them. Every smashed window and eye socket from which a cultist could lurk. Literally hundreds of vantage points from which to shoot down. It may prove to be a trial to get to the central area, where we need to be, where we need to strike. Land speeders cross the sky, laying waste to concentrations of defenders, bringing down entire levels of blocks with fire. The bouncing forms of the assault marines and our new Primaris Inceptors move at our flanks, heading off heavier resistance to clear our way. We set off. The bounding leap of the marine is not possible while we have these inquisitorial gangs in our number. Tedious, but necessary. The Crusader squad takes up a perimeter around them as we move forward. Occasional knots of cultists spring out at us from alleyways, first-floor walkways, doors, windows. We hack our way forward. These scum are not even a speed bump to the sons of Sigismund and rogal Dorn. Our heavy armor is impossible to bring into the confines of this conurbation, but that would make it too easy anyway. We approach the main square, and then my sight becomes a thing of two worlds. I can see the real world as it is, but also there are lights and shimmering hazes. The Emperor shows me the way. He indicates my target. And there, at the base of the stairs to their main building, the real threat shows itself. For at the base of the wide stairs leading up to this palace, there are ranks of orderly, organized and disciplined troops. Our first real resistance. Armored and with power weapons, they must form some elite for this rabble. They're uniformed, but twisted. Their shields locked together. If I did not know better, I would say that their attire and weaponry was akin to that of a crusader with Sauron. But their genesis is unimportant. The line troops are not my concern. It is their lord. He is standing at the top of the stairs, his armor blazing with flames. Twisted lava forms runes around him that drop liquid fire like Prometheum on the ground. He has a plethora of them around him, buzzing like bees. He is bright enough already, but to my sight, he shines like a star, but one I can look directly into without discomfort or wincing. He is one of my targets this day. Initiates charge forward, their neophytes in tow, but we have done this before. I've been a part of what we call, in our crusade, the stairway to the throne. I see that they are prepared. The three initiates run in a line some paces separated, sheathing their swords for a second to indicate compliance with my intent. I bellow to let them know I am coming. I run forward, then launch myself up, stepping on one, then another of my brothers as I hunch down and rise with my foot, elevating me further. The last one turns and stops, cradling his mighty hands together as I bound towards them. My foot lands in the cradle, and he pushes up and out, so I am launched clear of the line of guards. I land on the stairs, but 3 paces below their leader, when I hear the Crusader squad make contact with the wall of shields. The Chaos Warrior smiles at me, a toothy grin with too many teeth, that then slips as the lava runes around him are simply blown away, literally. A wind that comes from the second inquisitorial group. They tore down his defenses, so I can do the rest. His axe comes down at me as he tries to retain the high ground. I easily move aside, angling the black blade in my hand so that his strike is deflected, but its momentum is not stopped. His axe goes into the marble stairs and he is overbalanced. It is child's play for me to twist and sever his head from his shoulders. A scream of 1,000 voices echoes around the square as we are all blown sideways, backwards, down, by the explosion of his body. I am caught in the fireball, but nothing of this evil will pass through my armor, for this is no normal power armor I wear today. As the Emperor's champion, I am honored to wear the armor of faith. Ancient, powerful, thrice blessed by the God Emperor. And while I wear it, I shall fear no evil penetrating my guard, not unless they be the mightiest of adversaries, and this lackluster lord is hardly that. The explosion and the effort of my brethren has cut down many of the enemy at the base of the stairs, but many get to their feet near as fast as my brethren, so they form up swiftly. Saulot Brachus points and chirrups out his order to Sloth. The huge Ogrin barrels into the line and brings it down. The interlocked shields, previously a thing of strength, now their greatest weakness. As the initial 3, he strikes drag down a half dozen. The young trainee of the other Inquisitor is way ahead of the others, and darts through a gap in the line. He moves amongst the rear of the enemies and stabs into the legs or back of any armoured men still standing. He may not be large, but he is swift and intelligent. The slightest assault from the rear is all that is required for my brothers to take them from the front. Their formation broken a second time. The heretics are torn to pieces by the Astartes. But oh, what is this? As the Inquisitors and their warriors make directly for the same walkway as me, Saulot's men, his slab shield Ogrin and his Crusader Knight forming up at the front just behind me, the rest in their shadow, I hear them. Thaddeus, do we have time? No, the ritual is nearing its conclusion. It's got to be now, or we face the wrath of the warp. Keep up, boy. But Master, the glyphs on the walls. We're walking into a fulcrum. We should be more cautious. Oh, really? You think you know better than I? Holy Throne, I question my decision every day. But you are proving even more dim-witted than I feared. We have no time for dalliance, boy. Keep your eyes on the prize, and keep up. Sloth, Sebastian, double time. I hear this and can see the coronas of power. My targets are before me. I run. They will keep up or they won't. I care not. My calling is too great. I pick up more speed when I come to the last corridor and see the large doors so obviously barred. The Emperor's own glamour shines from the edges of the doors, its hinges, its tops, its bottoms, wherever there is but a millimeter open. I am invited to my destiny. I draw out multiple crack grenades and lob them at the doors, dead center. The explosion smashes them apart and tears them off their hinges backward. Out of the smoke and falling masonry I come, making straight for the ritual. I can hear the Ogrin and the Crusader behind me as they are slowed by the debris, but not stopped. Before me is a scene from a fresco, a huge slab of antiquated design, their pantomime drama, gravitas, I suppose. On it are 3 bodies ready to be slain. None are held down, none tethered. They simply lay there transfixed, with glazed eyes and frothing mouths, muttering heresies of the most debauched vileness. Around them is a circle of figures in robes, so akin to the garb of our own priesthood. Twisted mockeries of the shepherds of the Emperor. They will pay. But they are not my primary concern, for the light of the Emperor guides my way. He shows me my target again. Above them, on an upper walkway, a viewing gallery, there is a being. He looks human at the present, but the light from him is greater than any star. It is he I must face. It is he I must best. Half of the cultists now break from the ceremony, leaving on a minimum crew, one might say. They turn and begin to chant a different cant. Walls of fire and force and wind and masonry are thrown up by them, cutting them off from the attentions of the Inquisitors and their followers. I stab my gaze around and find the stairs up to this gallery. It is too high to jump. The walls and fixtures too flimsy for a powered armor man to use with certainty. So I head for these stairs. The ritual is not the center point. It is to feed this being. He is the danger, not they. Boy, where are you going? Boy! I can't do anything about those wards, but I might be able to help the champion. No, boy. This is a duel. You cannot intervene. Come back. I'll have your head for this. The young man heads off after me. I dash the stairs as fast as I can and remain able to turn at their summit. I crash through the locked door with one hack of the holy black sword, and there he is. He steps out of the darkness to meet me. I waste no time and salute him in the name of the Emperor. I challenge him, and it is accepted. He is a larger man as well, but still I dwarf him. He almost languidly draws his own blade. No armor, no power armor, only delicate silken robes. Yet his stance is not defensive. He is preparing to meet me, to fight me head on head. Good. Alas, this is when he sweeps his sword in the air and a wave of power comes out at me. But I am the Emperor's champion. I am his holy warrior, and the Emperor protects. I recall the litany of divine protection, and the Emperor intervenes. The wave of power is broken and whips around me without harm. My enemy shifts his stance as I bound towards him and unleash my fury. His surprise is palpable, writ across his countenance. We clash. My first 10 strikes are designed to push him back, my size and strength test to see how he fares. I will not test this one. His blade casts light and sound through the air, making it difficult to make him out perfectly with my normal vision. But the light of the Emperor shines from him, clearly marks his outline, his position. My strokes were parried with ease. He has far more strength than he should. He is definitely not a baseline human anymore. Below me, the fray continues between visitors, my brethren crusaders and the cultists. Flashes of shields being penetrated by bolts from the assassin, as if they were not even there. The crusader attempting to cut his way through the shields, the ogryn doing the same, bludgeoning wildly. A flicked eye shows me the cultists are reducing in number, but still their ritual continues. The boy may be behind me, but that is his choice. I cannot and will not divide my attention. My target is all I see now. He pads around, shifting his feet for better control, preparing to unleash his speed, it seems. His blade whirls to create what he believes is an impenetrable barrier to my sight. The fool does not know, sends me. I slam my sword directly toward where he believes his torso is obscured. It passes through his effects with ease, and he is forced to somersault backwards, like an Eldar as a Xenos deviant. The blessings of his gods have magnified him, but he is no match for the wrath of the Emperor. A bolt round punches into the wall behind him, and the boy has attempted to distract him. It has changed his path, taken him from the trap I had laid. Standing back as I was in mock confusion at his lights, he bounds left instead of right, and I am dragged after him instead of seeing him impaled on the holy black sword I wield. Damn his interference. I sweep my sword backwards and catch a small piece of debris, sending it back at the boy to let him know his intervention is not needed or desired. The beast and I now circle each other. The chanting below raises to a crescendo. I can see energies infusing it now, like worms of power crackling up its lids and proceeding up its body. The power grows as we spar, our blades clashing again and again. Sparks of differing hues and shades flash between our swords,
Yeah, I guess
as
so.
his unnatural effect changes them. I suppose some might call it mesmerizing, or even beautiful, but to me it is only a sign of delay. He is stalling, holding me off while his power grows. I force the issue. I use the next 20 strikes to maneuver him into a corner. He cannot see my plan at first, cannot avoid it as the truth dawns on him. He is fast, I am faster. He is strong, I am stronger. He thinks he is blessed by his lords, so takes my invitation, and we test the theory. I strike down on him with all of my might, knowing he has no choice. He locks his sword to mine and we grind. We lean in, and I see his shifting features properly for the first time. Like a broken liquid mirror, his face is an ever-shifting parody of all that is pure and human. Glimpses of his future form arise and sink back again, as horns and teeth extend and elongate and then revert back again within a second. I must prevail. I slam my head into his, my helmet crashing into where a nose should be. I feel the impact, but see his eyes shift to the edges of his head, his nose flying up to his forehead before the impact. Yet I impact. He staggers back and I push him with all of my strength. His eyes are wide on his head, his stance unbalanced. He whirls on the spot and I can see the eyes spin out from his head like small globes on string that is ever extending. I've used his twisted powers against him. He is now dizzy, and I see him lurch. I place myself in a crouch and put all of my force and weight, my skill, faith, and zeal all into one strike. The black sword shudders as it pierces his torso dead center, through his heart. I am certain that were it any blade but this holy sword, it would have shattered on his robes. But this blade is the Emperor's blade, as much as I am his champion, and it slides between his ribs and through him, punching out of the other side. He stops. Blood spills from his mouth and flows over my pauldron, his eyes wide. His raised sword arm slowly sags. The chanting below us stops.
Yeah.
His sword slowly falls beside me. I see runes flash on it as I see it all in slow motion. My hands on my sword, the weight of the man on it. I cannot move fast enough. For some reason, I am aware that if that blade hits the ground, it will unleash the power built up. It is only now that I see that the light is coming from the sword, not really the man I have slain. The Emperor wishes me to destroy not only the wielder, but the blade itself. The longest second of my life flashes before my eyes, as I cannot stop what is about to happen. It is at the last second that a shadow falls over me. A hand darts out and grabs the hilt of the cursed blade. The boy. He darted in and yanks it up. His arms burst into flames and he screams. He cannot hold it for long. He has prevented it hitting the ground, but it is not deactivated. Power still flows from it, and the runes on its blade flash ever more powerfully. The boy locks eyes with my visor and looks upwards, as through clenched teeth. He then takes the last of his strength and hurls the blade into the air. I follow it due to his cue, and push him far back. He lands hard, of this I can hear, but he is now away from what I must do. The blade comes down tip first, desperately wanting to make contact with the platform, to be connected to the ground in any way it can, to then discharge its foul effect. But I am ready. I bring up the black sword with all of my might, every ounce of my strength. I shatter it. The black sword breaks the cursed blade, but a torrent of power is unleashed. I am carried off my feet and backwards, far. I hit something. Hard. My eyes darken as I lose consciousness. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and important units of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. As a note, gentle listener, please do always remember that my little tales at the start and throughout many of an entry are merely flavor pieces written by myself to help ease you into the imagery and fun of Warhammer. They are merely fan fiction, and by no means canon or ever intended to be so. For that, you will read or hear the official works of the Black Library, the writing wing of Games Workshop itself. And I can assure you, if you like my own ham-fisted attempts at tales, you're in for an almost limitless treat. For their books and audio dramas are expansive and often exquisite. Now, that all said, let us continue. For today, as promised, we shall be looking at one of the most interesting of the special units that are unique to the Space Marine chapter, the Black Templars. Although some other chapters now imitate the Black Templars in their use of this very special position, it is truly a Black Templar that personifies the title best. For it harkens all of the way back to the man who formed the Black Templars, that redoubtable warrior whose name still strikes fear into the hearts of traitor Astartes, the legendary Sigismund himself. And thus, we shall be discussing the Emperor's Champion. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, almost all chapters of the Space Marines have had an Emperor's Champion of their own at one time or another, especially during the period following the Horus Heresy, known as the Great Scouring. The practice is much less common in the 41st or 42nd millennium. However, the position of Emperor's Champion has played an important role within the ranks of the zealous Black Templars chapter, since the chapter's inception as a successor of the Imperial Fist, and has been maintained with reverence and high esteem throughout nearly 10,000 years or more of endless crusades and ceaseless conflict. In battle, it is the duty of a designated Emperor's champion to seek out and challenge the commander of the enemy force, fighting him or her in single combat for the glory of the Emperor. Many great battles and wars have been turned in favor of the Imperium by the slaying of enemy leaders or other key figures in a foe's chain of command by an Emperor's champion. Always at the forefront of the Black Templars' battle line strides a single figure, his gleaming blade carving a path of ruin through the foe. This warrior will challenge any enemy, no matter how great, for he is the Emperor's champion, and divinity Templars kneel before their chaplains and pray for the Emperor's favour. One amongst them may be granted a vision. In his mind's eye, angelic hosts wielding blades of fire bestride the stars, driving back the writhing shadows with their righteous fury. Glorious battles of both past and future whirl through the battle brother's mind, accompanied by the certainty that he has been chosen by the Emperor as his mortal vessel upon the field of battle. As this fugue state passes, the Space Marine knows that he must heed the summons and stand forevermore apart, bereft of his brothers in the searing light of the Emperor's gaze. The chaplains then lead the chosen battle brother to an isolated contemplation chamber. He is clad in holy raiment, donning the armor of faith, and surrendering his weapons in favor of one of the chapter's 10 sacred black swords. Only a handful of Emperor's champions arise each century, their emergence a miracle worthy of remembrance, and at any given time there can be only one in the... It is, therefore, the duty of the chaplains to ensure that a single black sword accompanies each crusade with its inception, ready should an Emperor's champion arise. Should this happen, the name of the blade's new wielder is inscribed into its obsidian hilt, immortalizing a new hero as a part of the blade's own legend. When battle is joined, divine might throws through the sinew of the Emperor's champion. His vision shimmers with golden... Welcome, gentle listener. I will apologize immediately to you, for I have been a liar of omission. You may have seen me extol the joys of the game in my bat reps and product reviews. You may have heard my passion when narrating the beginnings of the lore. But I have kept you in the dark for your own protection. I have been keeping something from you, and I feel it is now time. For there is a reason that Warhammer 40k is not just liked, or even obsessed over, but loved. Warhammer 40k is truly loved by its fans for very good reason. A reason I am about to reveal to you in all its bittersweet glory. It is not the toys, as splendid as they are. It is not the painting, as therapeutic as it is. It is not even the socialization and relaxation, which I laud so very much. It is the escapism. It is in its depth. No other fictional verse I know of, not even that of the Star Wars saga, has such depth. It is encapsulated in one terrible moment,
Okay,
one
honey.
single image. But you must understand it, to understand why it is so potent. What I call the longest second. It is contained within
I'll
the
be
story
here,
that I
Robin.
am about to tell you. But the moment I speak of is the defining instant that evokes such passion and loyalty in this world's adherents. It is why I consider the tale among the best and most heartrending fiction in modern Western literature. It may never gain the acclaim it deserves, and I certainly will not be able to do it justice. But I will try. So, gentle listener, put your hand in mine, metaphorically, and let us go to the darkest point in the universe. That which I call the longest second. Let us see why the Warhammer universe is so important to so many, why it stands the test of time. So, let us explore the existing lore of one of the greatest heroes, possibly the most tragic hero of the Warhammer universe, where this moment is contained. I introduce to you, gentle listener, the tale of the Primarch of the 7th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, to the Praetorian of Terra. Welcome to the tale of rogal dorn.
All hail rogal dorn.
Now, let us begin our journey. I must give you the briefest of snapshots of history, which I will cover in further detail later, because it has such a colossal, overbearing import to the story I must relate today.
Indeed it does.
Also, do bear in mind that this is merely an introduction to rogal dorn. To cover his history would simply not be consumable via this medium without a plethora of sittings. So be aware that I will revisit segments of this history in greater detail in the future, if it is requested. In a time of abject horror, a time when humanity was almost extinguished, a man arose to save us all. This individual was the man later known only as the Emperor of Mankind. For in the future, humanity had developed and bestrode the stars, forming a mighty confederation of planets far and wide. But as with all things, it was not to last. The means by which ships traversed the galaxy was called a warp drive, transporting into another adjacent universe known as the Immaterium or warp. Ships could travel to far distant stars in fractions of the time it would take them in the real world, the Materium. So the Human Federation colonized the stars when they developed these technologies. Technologies that would awe the people of today, well, for that matter, those of the later period of the 41st millennium. Humanity believed itself untouchable. Its robotic armies, the men of iron, were without number. Its fleets so advanced none, not even the ancient race called the Eldari, could match them without huge cost. Humanity was ascendant and felt its time had come. It felt invulnerable. But thus do all falls begin, with hubris, with arrogance. A string of things happened over a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things. But do not worry, as I shall cover them all in more detail in my own inimitable style at another juncture. But let us list them now, so we have context. The men of iron, the very armies of humanity turned on their masters. Hardly novel, but the way in which this impacts is phenomenal and very distinct. But we shall get into the nuances another time. Just know that much of humanity died in that ages-long struggle, which they barely won, with the assistance of others, against their own automated army. When humanity was on its knees, still recovering from the Holocaust that was the cybernetic revolt, further disasters then fast and light and made travel effectively impossible. As the Confederation of Planets of the Humans had always relied so heavily on trade and cooperation, the effects were immediate and catastrophic. Entire worlds would previously be cities.
I feel like this lore is exceedingly imperative. If you are going to try and understand the Black Templars, the Imperial Fist, any of that lineage, you have to understand rogal dorn. And really, if you want to understand 40k at all, you really need to try and understand rogal dorn and why that's important. It gives a lot of context. It gives a lot of perspective over why it means so much and why the Templars are the way they are and why the Imperial Fist were the way they were, and which shaped much of 40K. If we're being honest, I don't feel like you could understand 40K along with all its factions without understanding rogal dorn. And how impactful these series of events were. And detrimental, really, to the lore. It's deep and meaningful and worth the time to learn, really.
Or industrialized and relied entirely on the produce of their neighbors. These planets' populations swiftly went into famine and then into starvation. Rioting occurred across the galaxy, and the human civilization was swept away. Planets that relied on the goods and equipment produced by their neighbors were similarly unable to survive, or regressed into feudal worlds where the rule of the sword and might alone were all that one could hope for justice and peace. It was a time of strong men. On top of this, humanity started to realize its potentials again, and psychers, those able to tap into the energies of the warp to create wonders or defy the rules of the galaxy.
The story of rogal dorn, this is part 1. Periodically, and you may hear me stop the storyline to explain context or explain what something means. So, don't beat me. But psychos, much of you who listen to this may be completely new to 40K or not really even know 40K, just like the stories and not really understand what it's about. But in any case, psychos are like I don't want to call them wizards, but they're magical, which pretty well can be described like he's describing them. They can manipulate forces, like natural forces, or, manipulate things. It's a form of magic. It's another way to say magician or wizard or witch. It's a magical being, I guess. It would be the best way to put that. And not like Harry Potter or anything like that. I mean, they're still magical, but slightly different. Some of them can manipulate nature, machines, people, even armor. They can imbue things with magical abilities or runes. It's pretty deep. I mean, they don't all do the same thing. If that helps, good. I'm trying to kind of like when I broke down the use of the word squire versus the word page, or explain the Templars fighting style and its melee primarily. But anyway, I will try and stop these periodically and explain things here and there.
With increased regularity and with increased ability to harness the warp. The sad truth is that planets and societies that embraced this Nova Homus, the new man, the Psyker, were eventually to regret their openness. For as the Psykers emerged, their powers to tap into the warp started to attract bills that had never yet been encountered by humanity in the real world, the Materium. Psykers would succumb to the dark whispers of the denizens of the warp and be possessed. Denizens that the Imperium now called demons, and entire sectors would fall to their predations. A demon is almost impossible to defeat without a fully trained and astonishingly experienced and powerful Psyker on one side, or the kind of technology and weaponry that was fast disappearing due to the regression of huge swathes of human civilization. It was not to be, as there were none to train these nascent Psykers, none to protect them. The carnage and enslavement of these beings went unchecked for the most part.
Sorry, I'm looking for a picture.
The population of humanity shrunk even more. Their freedom torn from them, and lives reduced to that of cattle, chattel, or fodder, for the whims of their immortal and godlike masters, and Xenos alike. As humanity weakened, those races with which they had allied with to match the threat of the men of iron, their allies, all turned on them. Perhaps this is a propaganda of the Emperor, but none live who can gainsay or refute his reading of a past that he alone survived. For the Emperor is immortal, and has lived for a very long time. Thus did humanity get a crime that the Emperor has never forgotten, and his sons have been reminded of ere ever they embarked on the campaigns of the Great Crusade. This period is named the Age of Strife, by others Old Night, and it deeply affected the entire subconscious of the human race, scarred it beyond record.
Are you back yet, Robin? I gotta find us another picture. I've got to get better about photographing those, by the way. I'm really digging this bat. May not be medieval, but it's cute. Robin! Robin!
Recognition. For thousands of years, humanity was beaten, killed, enslaved, and corralled. We were almost stricken from history, and would have eventually been so, if it were not for the coming of the Emperor of Mankind. On the birth planet of humanity, once called Earth, now called Terra, Terra, the Emperor, who had watched all the ages of mankind, arose. He threw off his lifelong rules and fetters that prevented him from ever revealing himself. Before, he had no need, but now, This eternal human, the most powerful of all our kind, reckoned that there was simply no alternative. Terra itself had become a wasteland of feuding techno-barbarian states with the technology to create biological and mechanical terrors. It was infested with evil psychos and immoral wizards, entire states that had fallen to control by Xenos, the Imperium's termins. All the populace of Terra could do was look on in darkness.
Hey, Robin. I'm gonna start my stream and say hello to you, woman. So what's going on? I won't commentate on it if you don't want me to. I'll just read it. But I missed you, Robin. Love you. I'm glad to see you. You're beautiful. Beautiful Robin.
And evil, pain and tyranny, until the coming of the Emperor. Within a scant few hundred years, he had created his Custodian Guard and his Thunder Warriors, the precursors to his Space Marines, and took the fight out to the lands around him. He began the Wars of Unification. We will skip to the end of this period, as I will update you as time goes on, with the lore of that period as I can. But needless to say, the Emperor crushed all before him, and unified the humans of Earth, of Terra, and destroyed any and all outside influences that had helped to bring humanity low. But this was just the beginning. The Emperor prepared a great crusade, a great army to go forth from Terra, and with but one goal alone, the saving of humanity. With his genetically engineered warriors, the Adeptus Astartes, his Space Marines, he prepared to take back the galaxy in the name of peace.
What did it do? I won't say any names. You can refer to it as it. And I'll know who you're talking about. That way it avoids any problems. But go ahead and feel free to talk, man.
Peace and justice. As the Sol system fell to his designs, the technological armies of Mars were added to his forces. For Mars had intact the Age of Strife. Although a shadow of the power of the human confederation, the tech priests of Mars still commanded great power and had fleets of warships and terrifying forces of titans, colossal vehicles of war. With Mars on...
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I've heard that someone was picked up, but again, I wasn't watching, so I can't say for certain, but that was not smart. You don't pick up hitchhikers. It's never good. Yeah, I'm sure Ted Bundy looked nice. I'm sure Jeffrey Dahmer looked like a nice guy. I'm sure like 90% of like serial people looked like nice people. Robin, I love you, girl. I do. But sometimes you have tried everything, Robin. You have been there and you have been a real friend. But sometimes if your friend isn't listening to you, you have to step back and remove yourself and let them find out on their own. They'll eventually pull their head out of their ass at some point, but there's no need in you going down with the ship. You've done everything you can, and sometimes people don't listen. And sometimes all you can do is step back and wait on them to wake up. Unfortunately. And it hurts and it's hard to do. But sometimes that's the only way they ever learn. But anyway, that's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. She's a grown woman. I know she's acting very irresponsibly, irrationally, and manic. And if exactly, you have to understand that she knows that and knew that when she did it and didn't care. She didn't care if she traumatized an entire chat. She didn't care if her actions had consequences for other people. She was getting views and she was getting attention. And as long as people are going to give her attention and views for behaving like that, she's not going to quit. She's going to get worse because she's like, well, if I did that and I got that many views, if I up my game, I'll get even more views. I think everybody needs to drop off for a little bit and kind of teach her that that kind of behavior is not going to give her a reward. Because if you show her that kind of behavior gets her a reward, it's going to get worse and worse. And she's just going to keep upping the ante like a toddler throwing a tantrum. If you don't give in the first tantrum, they'll make the tantrum worse. And then you give in that time, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. I think her chats need to be empty for a little bit, especially for that stunt. I know she's a grown woman, but she needs to be treated like a child if she's gonna act childish. Don't get me wrong, I care, but sometimes caring is tough love. Sometimes if you care about somebody, you have to be tough on them, no matter how much it hurts your feelings. Because if it hurts your feelings, but it does them good, you know, if you don't do it for their own good, you're really not caring about them. You're caring more about your own feelings than you are about that person. And if you really care about her, you're going to have to stop enabling that. And by giving her the attention for that kind of behavior, you're enabling that behavior. Do not reward bad behavior. That's why I wasn't there today, Robin. Yesterday I left when she started acting a fool. I was like, I'm not going to support this. I want to see her get home and get safe. After that, I am out. And after she got home, I left. Because I'm not going to enable her. I care about her well-being, but because she's a human being. I'm not going to jump on the hate train. I want to see her do better and be better. I think she needs some help. I mean, I really do. I think she needs some help. Because she seems to me to be very, very unstable right now.
On his side, genetically engineered armies growing apace, the Emperor took off into the galaxy, a twofold mission. The first, as stated, to bring freedom, wisdom, and safety to the beleaguered humans spread across the stars. The second mission was, while moving ever onwards and outwards, to find the suns he had built. For there were 20 legions of superhuman warriors, the Astartes, that had been crafted and grown, but each was different due to their template being a different Primarch. The Primarchs, which I will cover in more detail soon, were 20 demigods, the 20 sons of the Emperor that he genetically designed, forged, and prepared to lead his armies in his great crusade. They were.
And if you want to hear the harsh truth of that, Robin, the harsh truth of that is that she knew it would enact that kind of emotion in people. She knew you would be upset. She knew that people would be worried sick. And she did it anyway for that reason. Because she lost worried about her. You were worried, literally sick. The fact is, she probably got some kind of fix off of it. Honestly. I hate it. But some people get off on that kind of attention. And I'm afraid that she may be one of those people. And she knew you'd be worried. She knew it would upset you. And she did it anyway. She knew better than that when she did it. So I think for you, Robin, the best thing you could do is step back for a while. Take a break. Because that was not right. Friends don't treat friends like that. That's not what you do. When you care about somebody, you don't do that. I know it's gonna hurt, but for her own well-being, Robin, that's what you need to do, in my opinion. Now, you could take that advice, or you could not take that advice. It's up to you. You're grown, but that is my advice. I love you.
Were made from his very own genetic stock and in his image. But in a terrible moment before their birth, each was taken in their capsules and spread amongst the stars by the powers of chaos. The gods of chaos, who hate the emperor of mankind, naming him the anathema, seemed terrified of the power the emperor would have if he had his sons with him. But they were not able to destroy the Primarchs
I
for
love
some
you too,
reason.
Robin.
So they found a chink
You
in his
know that.
armors, a hole in his wards, in the emperor's palace under the...
I love you too, Robin. Or I wouldn't have stopped and gave you that advice. I wouldn't have even bothered with it, but I do care about you. And I don't like to see my friends mistreated, and that's what that was. And honestly, it's just that you're my friend. You're a good person, and sometimes being a true friend means doing shit you don't want to do. Kind of like tough love. It's not easy to do, but if you care about somebody, you do it. I guess it's the mom in me. But I feel very protective over the people I care about. And anyway. Right? But you're a good person, Robin. That's why people stand behind you. It's because you're a good person. And you're so goddamn lovable, I can't help it. You're too cute.
The Himalaya mountains and whisked away his sons and deposited them on worlds across the galaxy. Thus, and outward it would, one by one, find the Parnarchs, the very sons of the Emperor.
I don't know
And
what I was thinking
mighty
of this
sons
picture. I
they
think I like
were.
to torture
Each
myself.
dwarfed a space marine as much as a space marine would a normal human.
I think I like to torture myself. Look at all these really, 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 really tiny ass lines that I chose to color. I picked this picture. That was me. That was a choice I made. Tiny lines. And it's not just one or two tiny little lines. No, ma'am. Because when I choose to torture myself, I go all out. Yes, I do. I chose millions of tiny little lines because I wasn't satisfied with only 100,000. No, I must have a million tiny little lines. Yes. Yay, self torture.
But not just in size, but also in intellect, subtlety, skill, reflexes, wisdom, and power. Truly the Primarchs were titans of old, and heroes the like that would put Perseus, Achilles, or even mighty Heracles to shame. And so it was that the capsule that contained the infant rogal Dorn landed on a planet called Inwit, an ice world and a hard place for humanity to even survive on. Crowded.
You may think that he just mispronounced Hercules, but you're wrong. Historically accurate, actually. is his pronunciation of that. Because the correct pronunciation of Hercules would have been Heracles or Hercules. It wouldn't have been Hercules. So big movie companies who've made Hercules movies over the last decade pronounce it wrong. Just an interesting fact you may or may not have known.
It in darkness, the other in light, but neither prosperous or easy. Inward's sun was old and gave off little heat or light, so the planet was more akin to a ball of ice.
Heracles.
We would consider a planet for human habitation. The populace of Inuit were hardy and stern, as they had no choice, as weakness was death. A harsh civilization that bred stoic and rugged determination as a matter of course. To quote,
Panda, the
conflict
educational
against the
channel.
clans was common, and young warriors learned how to defend against their clan's enemies as early as they learned how to
That in and
endure
of itself
the
is
death
funny.
touch of Inuit's merciless chill. They were incredibly quick learners and had an innate sense of an object's functional value, and most importantly, they have the strength and intelligence to conquer those who possess knowledge they do not. Long ago, before the coming of the Emperor was even a dream on night-shrouded terror, the people of Inuit began to create their own realm in the stars. On every world they took, they assimilated, realigned, and reinforced. With each conquest, their culture and learning grew, but Inuit itself remained unchanged, even as it became the center of a stellar empire. The ice hives and clan disputes remained, and while their world birthed starships and ringed its orbits with weapon stations, its rulers kept to the old ways, the ways that had created their strength. The warlords and matriarchs who commanded armies amongst the stars, still living lives little easier than their vassals. It was as part of this burgeoning empire that rogal Dorn grew to manhood, then to rule its domains as emperor. Much of his early years remain unknown, or at least little talked about. It is, however, certain that in the cold and darkness of Inuit, a boy named Rogal by his adoptive kin rose to lead the House of Dorn, also known as the Ice Caste, and then to the rule of the Inuit cluster. The patriarch of the clan that raised Dorn became an adoptive grandfather to him, and taught him much of tactics, strategy, and diplomacy. Even after he discovered he was not blood related to his grandfather, Dorn held his memory in high value. He kept a fur-edged robe that had belonged to the man, and slept with it on his bed every night. His qualities married perfectly with those of Inuit, and he pushed their empire further than any other. Rogal led and trained his armies and fashioned spacecraft the like of which had not been seen before. Rogal then discovered a piece of luck. On his voyages of discovery, his ships came across a relic of the past, a great and powerful weapon. For in the Inuit system there was a vessel from the dark age of technology, a battleship of vast size which Dorn named the Phalanx. With this as his new capital ship and flag, he moved out and continued the work of his forebears of Inuit. He expanded the empire across the neighboring systems at a frightening pace, the hardy people of Inuit following wherever he led. Rogal's fleets then made contact with the outmost pathfinders and rogue traders at the vanguard of the Great Crusade. He was the 7th of the 20 Primarchs to be discovered by his father, the Emperor of Mankind. The meeting was a joyous one, for Rogal recognized the greatness in the Emperor and his connection with him the moment they met. For the Emperor, the blessing and joy was magnified.
Robin, honey, you don't owe anybody an explanation. But we just don't talk about that. for your own good. So, in future, as is, please don't even mention it. You're a good person and you're really kind, but just don't bring it up. No, I know. I know, Robin. Trust me, I get it. I really, I get it. But we're just not going to put you in that position here. That's not what I do. When you're able to, I'm sure you will, if you want to. If not, it's really none of nobody's business.
By the discovery of not only a son, but a thriving and powerful military culture as well, rogal Dorn offered a mighty ship thanks to his father, the Emperor. So loyal was he, so swift. But the Emperor gave it back to him to command and bade him to take command of the Astartes, the Space Marines, that had been made out of Rogal's own genetic stock. Effectively, Rogal's long-lost sons. Dorn accepted, but he had conditions. Dorn did not speak a single word to his legion when he first met them. He is quiet and brooding, a demigod watching them while they tried to please him. He insisted he watched them in combat, and watch them he did. When the battle was over, he finally broke his silence. Rogal Dorn informed them that they were warriors, but they had much to learn. So, in his inimitable way, Rogal forged his connection with his legion, the only way that could ever have happened, by example. Dorn trained his men, and his leadership and guidance complemented their existing skills and honed them to a razor's edge. The 7th Legion had merged with their Primarch more seamlessly than ever before, and became a thing of dread and wonder. For the reason why the sons were so like their father, the Imperial Fists of the 7th Legion, I will leave to their own video, but it was a match made in heaven. It was perfection. From there, the days of the Crusade began for rogal Dorn and his newly forged legion, the 7th, the Imperial Fists. The Crusade was a constant struggle, a constant war, but one Rogal was more than equipped for it in every way. He started fighting alongside the Emperor, as all of the Primarchs did, bar only one. When he had been molded, and the Emperor had decided it was time, Rogal was seconded to the forces of his oldest brother. I say oldest, as in he was the first found by the Emperor, the longest serving at his side, the most trusted and trained by the Emperor. He was Horus Lupercal, the hammer of the Emperor, and later, his war master. Rogal finally serving alongside not only an equal for the first time in his life, but one he considered worthy of his respect, and perhaps a little adoration. For to Rogal, Horus Lupercal was everything a Primarch and statesman, warrior and leader should be. Rogal and Horus were fast friends, and firm ones. Once Horus himself stated that his legion, the Lunar Wolves, later to be called the Sons of Horus after Alinor, were the finest in assault, and that if he met the Imperial Fists of War, that it would be an unending stalemate. The irresistible force versus the immovable object. So high in Horus's opinion was his loyal and redoubtable brother Rogal. They fought side by side as brothers on many campaigns, They thought they would never be anything but the closest of friends. But Rogal was most often in the theatres of war led directly by the Emperor, and became known to be like a shadow to the master of mankind. Rogal also made bonds with other Primarchs over many campaigns thereafter, but he was not charismatic or outgoing, and could be known as blunt, so did not always fit in or act in a way to elicit true friendship. The other Primarch he shared a special bond with was, of course, the one Primarch that nearly all of the brothers not only respected but loved. It was Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels. In Sanguinius he found the traits that most exemplified the goal of the Crusade and the best in humanity, despite Sanguinius's obvious mutation, the wings that grew out of his back. Rogal and Sanguinius's relation was only to grow into one of true camaraderie and respect. In the dark times that followed, it was always his brother Sanguinius in which he trusted. In the war to end all wars, it was his brother the Angel that strode forth when he could not, despite Rogal wishing with all his heart that he could go instead and save the Angel, just in case. It was all
For those who know me, you know how much I love Sanguinius. Sanguinius is the best. Because Sanguinius is amazing. All hail Sanguinius.
also his brother Sanguinius alone who shared in the burden of the defense of the palace. But we get ahead of ourselves. Sanguinius, Rogal, and Horus formed that few understood. They had one other shared. Let's wait for the moment. In the Crusade, forces of the Imperium pushed forever out and out, further and further. None could stop them. None could gainsay their power, their purpose, their path. And in the Crusade, all of the worst horrors of old night, the period of humanity's weakness and need, were highlighted in graphic display. The Xenos tyrants they fought, crushing humans under their feet. The mad sorcerers and psychers who dominated all life for systems around. The degradation of humanity was finally over whenever the Crusade arrived. The Crusade, as far as Rogal was concerned, brought emancipation, safety, and hope to all of the lost tribes of humanity, and it punished their gaolers, their abusers, and their foes. Where other legions moved forward in lightning swift raids and brought planets into imperial compliance fast, but moved on as quickly, it was not the way of the imperial fists. Where Horus might have won the Imperium, it is said that Rogal Dorn built it. Wherever a war had been fought, Rogal set up defences and hard points, castles and keeps, so that no insurrection would rise, but also so those worlds he conquered were defensible, and their peoples left with pride. He built each world up and did not move on until he had improved the conditions of all those who lived there, as his brother Horus had taught him, and his father, the Emperor, had instructed him. Rogal believed. Where others fought for the battle, or for glory, or for accolades and honours, Rogal fought because he believed. He believed in his brothers. He believed in his father. But most important of all, he believed in the dream. The bright and beaming dream of a humanity free, safe, and happy, where they need not fear the skies or the dark or privation or ignorance. Rogal fought for a better tomorrow for his entire race, and he built that better tomorrow with every castle, keep, and border he constructed. Rogal believed in the dream of the Imperium of Man. The Crusade came to a head finally with two great campaigns. One I cannot mention here, but the other was the campaign at Alinor. At Alinor, the greatest collection of greenskins ever witnessed occurred, and the forces of the Imperium of Man rose to the occasion. It was the Emperor and Horus Lupercal who met this threat head-on. Others were involved, but it was these two titans of war that met the leadership of the Alinor Orcs at the heaviest of the fighting. On the day the great Orc war boss finally was brought to Brook, the Emperor himself was saved by Horus, who beheaded the greenskin warlord, and the battle and the war was over. In recompense for this, and by the mountain of accolades and proofs of loyalty, fidelity, and ability, did the Emperor elevate Horus Lupercal to the exalted state of War Master. The Emperor set him above his brothers to lead them as he had done beforehand. And with that, the Emperor then left the crusade to return home to Terra to deal with other issues. It was one of the greatest days in the life of Rogal, for he could genuinely admired his big brother and supported him, and, despite never showing it, as it was not his way, he was so happy for Horus. He thought no other would have made sense, and Horus repaid that trust and augmented it by secreting himself for a time and asking Rogal to help him reinvent himself, to define and agree the identity and duties of a War Master, and to set a bar that Horus must always hold himself to. Horus came to Rogal as one of his closest friends, but also as one of the most accomplished and powerful of all of the Primarchs in the arts of war. Also, to some extent, he came in statescraft and how to manage his other brothers, for he had not forgotten that Rogal Dorn had once, before his finding by the Emperor, been monarch of an empire of warriors. The administrative approach of Gulliman would not have suited the situation, much as he is lauded for his ability, as it was a congregation of warriors of legend that Horus would have to ride, have to bend to his will, his direction. It could not be done by diktat. After a time, the Emperor recalled Dorn to Terra to be his Praetorian. The Emperor of Mankind had his body and palace guards in the Custodians, the 10,000. But yet he called back Rogal to be with him, to protect Terra and the Sol system, and to improve the defenses of the Imperial Palace, much as they thought they would not be needed. Many were aggrieved at this singular honor. Perturabo of the Iron Warriors in particular railed against this favoritism shown to Rogal, but Rogal did not care. Rogal Dorn knew that he was the best man to be at his father's side. I have a theory as to another reason that Rogal might have been at the Emperor's side. But again, we must wait for that dreaded moment. And it was at this point that the horror began in earnest, and nothing Rogal had seen before this prepared him for what was to come. Nothing could. Whilst he was leading a small contingent of his hand-picked guard on his way to Terra to take up his position as Praetorian, Rogal found a lost ship hailing for assistance. It was the Eisenstein. Aboard were Death Guard who demanded to speak with him immediately. In that fateful moment, that most charged of encounters, Rogal Dorn found out the terrible truth. The Death Guard warrior, Captain Nathaniel Garrow, was a harbinger of doom to Rogal, as he informed the Primarch that his brother, Horus Lupercal, had turned traitor, and had recruited others, and they were now in open rebellion against their father. For this, Garrow nearly lost his life, as Rogal was so staggered and enraged by this infamy that he doubted Garrow so much he nearly killed him, even though enough evidence came forward to prove the word of Garrow and confirm that the worst nightmare had started. The War Master, Horus, had turned his back on the Imperium and the Emperor, and was preparing to make war on all those who remained loyal to the throne. Poor Rogal. One cannot imagine the crushing, heart-rending desolation he must have felt at this news. Why he could not accept it immediately, For one of his brothers turning against the Emperor was one thing. Perhaps Angron, or humiliated Lorgar, or even the insane Conrad. But for his oldest brother, his big brother, the one he admired the most, the one he had vested the most hope in, to have fallen. In that moment it shook rogal Dorn to the core. Out of nowhere, the hope, the dream of the Imperium was wounded, as it had never been before for Rogal. For one of his brothers to turn would have elicited rage, not confusion. How Rogal must have hurt then, to have the greatest and closest Primarch to the Emperor, his war master, a most trusted son, to turn on him was beyond belief. For Horus Lupercal had turned his back not only on his sire, not only on his loyal brothers, but on the dream of the Imperium. Also, this would have thrown Rogal into such confusion, for if Horus, the brightest light, and the Primarch who seemed so ardently to believe in the hope of the Crusade, for Horus to call it a lie was almost too much to bear. Rogal must have wanted to take flight to confront his brother immediately, not to fight him, but to implore him to return to the light. But no, Dorn, the warrior inside the soul of this Primarch, must have known. As soon as he heard that 3 of his brothers had fallen to the darkness surrounding Horus, he knew. He knew that Horus was not alone, and that the others would buoy him up and keep him on the course he was on. The likes of Angron or Mortarion were understandable. But Fulgrim, shock upon shock, horror upon nightmare, grief piled on grief. With such surrounding him, Rogal knew that Horus would not be able to be taken from his path, would never be able to bend the knee and beg for clemency. He needed to be adored, so did Horus. So the die was cast, and Dorn knew it would not wash off. Dorn sent his fleet to the Istvan system where the treachery was occurring, and took himself and his elite to Terra to inform his father, the Emperor. Horus Lupercal had turned to evil. He had been seduced by the dark powers of corruption, the dark gods of chaos. More than this, he had turned other brothers with him. The visitors from the Einsenstein reported that Horus had turned Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Mortarion of the Death Guard. 4 full legions were in revolt, led by the most able general of them all. Rogal returned to Terra and his father. The Emperor issued a full 7 legions and their Primarchs to destroy the rebellion. As the arch-traitors mounted their defense and raised their banner on Istvan V, the retribution force of the Emperor prepared to land. 3 legions were to make landfall first and assault the strong points of the traitors, to then be supported by the other 4. The Salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard landed on Istvan and began their furious attack on the positions of Horus and his treacherous brothers. What happened next is too complex and too important to cover here, but in very brief. The 3 were tricked. They were betrayed. For the other 4 legions that landed behind them, the Word-Bearers, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords, had already gone over to the ruinous powers. They landed and set up fortifications, then joined with Horus's forces and simply blasted the 3 loyalist legions to smithereens. And when they were done with that, they drew out their chainswords and engaged in close combat. The butchery was great. The 3 loyalist legions, the Salamanders, Raven Guard, and Iron Hands, were taken by surprise, betrayed, and nearly exterminated that day. But worst of all, brother actually slew brother. Although Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, and Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, managed to escape that terrible trap, Ferrus Manus, the Primarch of the Iron Hands, was slain, his head cut off his shoulders by his erstwhile best friend and closest confidant in all of the Primarchs, no less than his brother, Fulgrim. What occurred to the Imperial Fist near Istvan will be covered in their own video, but after a short period, Rogal issued their recall to the Sol system to assist in its defense. His legion, despite having the upper hand against...
I think I hear wedding bells in my chat. Hey, Lisa. Aziz and Robin are gonna get married. My lovebirds. Do 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 do. I mean, y'all may as well get married. Sometimes y'all fight like a married couple. Miss Lovely Lisa. Robin, Emma yells at everybody. She yells at me often. That's how she shows her love. That's her love language. If she doesn't yell at you, she doesn't love you. She should at least yell at you once or twice a week. The more she yells, the happier she is. Kind of like when I set a GoFundMe for her garbage disposal because Canadians don't have garbage disposals. Yeah, Lisa, it was bad. I've heard all about it. It was a stupid thing to do.
...the more numerous opponent, and were winning, did as instructed, and taking casualties, they withdrew from combat as instructed. For the Imperial Fists were ever obedient to their lord, no matter the situation. The next few years were a living hell for Rogal Dorn. He was given command of the remainder of the Loyalist armies as the new War Master of the Emperor, outnumbered and constantly outmaneuvered by his brother, Horus Lupakar. The war always seemed to go against Rogal. He fought like a tiger, organized like a whirlwind, and was as tactically astute as any who could have filled his role. Better, perhaps, even than his opposite number, if their roles were reversed. But the inevitable occurred, and the Loyalists were pushed back again and again. Nor would all of his brothers obey his commands, nor follow his lead, despite the stakes involved. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wars, went off on his own rampage, nearly slaying the traitor War Master, but he did not finish the job when he had the chance. Then he and his legion and fleet were forced into consecutive battles, all designed for one thing, the one thing Rogal...
Robin, you and I both know that had I been in that chat, she probably would have never liked me again. Because me. I can be quite crass when irritated.
Feared most, the prevention of the Volker Fenriker, the Space Wolves, from being able to return to defend the Palace of Terror. Rogal was practically alerted, or in far-flung battle, and unable to answer his klaxon call to the throne world. He only had Jagatai, a brother that few knew, fewer still looked or trusted, despite him doing nothing to deserve the reaction. Rogal was, to all intents and purposes, so very, very alone. At this point, I will apologize again to your listeners, for I cannot bring myself to rush this.
I'm okay. No, she won't listen to anybody. That's her problem.
Welcome, gentle listener. Before we continue, I would implore you to listen to my first entry concerning Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terror.
Oh, for those listening, I usually do it, but I haven't yet. I usually pin my Cash App or my PayPal in the thingy, but I forgot to again, but I'll pin it in the comment section of this video. I'm trying to save up for a webcam so I can stream through StreamYards and do my artwork while streaming, so you guys can watch the videos with me if you feel like tipping your host. If not, that's cool too, but if you do, thank you in advance.
Without the context therein contained, I feel you would be robbing yourself of the impact of the information that is presented here. But as always, I am at your disposal. Also, I would have it noted, gentle listener, that I have omitted so much
I
as
meant
to
to
make
say
a
that like
veteran
an
of
hour
the
ago and I
setting
forgot.
enraged. But do remember that this is an introduction only, and not the entirety of the events to which Rogal Dorn was party, nor an attempt to explain the entirety of the drama. For there are many perspectives, so much information, that people retreat into the world of Warhammer for months, years, and even decades, as a refuge from the vicissitudes of the world. As I stated in my previous entry for Rogal, it is the very appeal of the Warhammer universe, its scope, its depth. So, let us continue the tale of the greatest story of the Warhammer 40k universe. The reason it is loved so deeply. Its very soul. I speak not of Rogal
She
Dorn
did,
specifically,
Lisa. She really
but
has
of the
tried.
dreaded moment. The darkest point in
Everybody's
this fictional
tried.
world. What I call the longest second, which is contained herein. First, let us paint the scene. We left it with Rogal on Terra, Earth, the birthplace of humanity. But let us familiarize ourselves with the cast of players, the stars of the dark drama that is about to unfold. For without this knowledge we cannot appreciate the man of whom I speak, Rogal, and the titanic struggle which he faced, practically alone. We know that there were 20 Primarchs, But two had passed from history before the rebellion of Horus, forever afterwards called the Horus Heresy, began. 8 fell to chaos and sided with Horus, making a full half of the total number of the Legiones Astartes, the Space Marines. First, we shall discuss those
Robin.
Primarchs and their legions that remained faithful. 9 should have been loyal. So why was Rogal so outnumbered and alone? The simple truth is that Horus Lupercal fell to evil far before he raised his treacherous banners on Istvan V, years before. While invested with the power and authority of War Master, High Lord and General of all of the forces of the Emperor, Horus plotted, schemed, and planned. He knew which Primarchs, and by dint of this, their legions, that would never recant their loyalty to their father, the master of mankind, the Emperor. So, knowing full well his inevitable need to rebel openly, he prepared. Oh, long did he prepare before he turned the color.
I did a two-tone on these grapes, and I was
we
wondering
know that he schemed to destroy a large segment of the Loyalist armies by deed of ambush, as I have related at the betrayal of Istvan V, the drop site massacre, where full 3 Loyalist legions were shattered. The legions destroyed were the Iron Hands,
that's why
sons of Ferrus Manus,
two shades of purple on it.
The Salamanders, sons of Vulcan, and the Raven Guard, the sons of Corvus Corax.
It's a pain in the butt, but it
that
looks
left
good.
6 more. So in the months and years before he raised his banners and proclaimed himself, Horus contrived to send them to places so far-flung or dangerous that they would not be able to stop him when the final deed was realized. Rebut Gilliman, the Primarch of the most numerous and most organized legion, the Ultramarines, was sent as far to the galactic east as Horus could send him without raising suspicion. But more than this, he also was led into a trap laid by Lorgar. Leman Russ, the Wolf Lord and self-professed Emperor's executioner, who led the Vulca Fenrica, the Space Wolves, also was sent far afield, but we know he returned to Terra, but then went on a rampage, and was secluded and harried until he was unable to support Rogal. Lion L. Johnson, the Lion, the Primarch of the First Legion, the Dark Angels, was sent to the galactic north. For the Lion was a dire threat to Horus and his rebellious brothers, as he was a natural genius in the arts of war.
Yes, Lisa.
His legion, the most lauded after only the sons of Horus. He was sent as far away as Horus could practically get away with. Horus, like all of the Primarchs, had a natural fear of the Lion on an instinctive level. He was neutralized thus as the highest priority. Sanguinius, the Angel and Primarch of the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels. Horus knew this particular brother was also a dire threat to any rebellion, and Horus connived to send him into a trap again in the galactic north. But for the full tale of the trap, we will have to wait until I can perform an entry for this, the most loved of all Primarchs. Ferrus Manus was dead. Vulcan was missing, presumed dead also. Corvus Corax's legion was a shadow of its power, denuded of numbers after the Dropside massacre, despite Corvus's attempt to artificially increase his numbers through cloning. He was betrayed again by the Alpha Legion, and he failed. Thus Rogal asked him, the master of the raid and surprise attack, to skirt the oncoming juggernaut of the traitors and attack their supply lines. Thus it was that Corvus played merry hell with the rear of the traitor advance, but never enough to do more than slow them and annoy them with constant inconvenience. Horus knew his craft and had prepared for all eventualities. This left only Jagatai, and his white scars, and rogal Dorn and his imperial fists to fight the traitors. But there were so many of them, so well led, so many Primarchs in the field, so many forces that had turned. But let us explore them now, the legions of evil, the cohorts of chaos, so we can grasp the magnitude of rogal's heroism, for any human must be judged by the caliber of their opposition, and oh, what opposition rogal had to contend with. The forces of evil. Lorgar Aurelian, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers Legion, who is known as the First Traitor, accredited with being the spider behind the scenes that facilitated the fall of the War Master. Lorgar had turned to chaos years before Horus. He was sent to the worlds of Ultramar, the home of the Ultramarines, and met with them as a friend, only to turn on them in a well-laid ambush on the world of Calth. The attempt was to do unto the Ultramarines what the traitors had done at the drop site massacre. But though the word-bearers attacked with fury and completely unlooked for, the Ultramarines were more organized and ever prepared, and the projected massacre instead turned into a battle that Reboot was winning. Angron, dubbed by many as the Red Angel, the Primarch of the World Eaters, who was sent with Lorgar to the east and performed surprise raids on the worlds of Ultramar, the home of Reboot Gilliman and his Ultramarines, while they were waylaid at Calth. Angron visited a high toll from the worlds of Ultramar, but was soon pushed back by the well-organized and professional forces of the Ultramarines. Lorgar then enacted a huge dark ritual that summoned a warp storm, called the Ruin Storm in history, and cut the galactic east off from Holy Terror. Thus were the Ultramarines and Reboot unable to answer the call to Terror, because they did not hear it. So dire were things that Reboot Gilliman actually believed that Horus had already won, and the Emperor was already dead. Thus, he did not even look to Terror until later. Conrad Kurz, called the Night Haunter, Primarch of the Night Lords, was playing a strange game with his loyalist brothers on the other side of the Ruin Storm. But that is for another time. Alfarius and Omegon, the twin Primarchs, and Lords of the Alpha Legion, were not with Horus's main thrust, but we should get to them in due course. Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, who, over the time of the rebellion, not only fell to evil, but became a demon prince, infused with the power of the dark gods, and twisted out of all recognition in the service of the god Slanesh, the Lord of Excess. Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard, also became a thing of horror, and he also became a demon prince, but this time to the service of the god Nurgle, the Lord of Decay. Perturabo, Primarch of the Iron Warriors, who had an enduring hatred of rogal Dorn and all of his sons, the Imperial Fists. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Sons, who had also been transformed into a terrifying apparition of evil, a demon prince of Tzeentch, the Lord of Change. All did as instructed by Horus, well, within limits. Their combined legions inexorably ground forward, crushing all resistance in their path. Eventually, they all met with the arch-traitor, the War Master Horus Lupercal, on the world of Alinor Prime, the very site where Horus had been elevated to War Master. From there, they moved forward into the last phase of their campaign, the attack on the Sol System, the heart of the Imperium, where Terror was. This may have seemed like the beginning of a biblical book, the unending names, but I wish to update you on the situation and, more importantly, to graphically outline the forces arrayed against rogal as the unofficial war master of the Loyalist armies. Each Primarch was a titan of war, a genius, a charismatic leader, and a terror. Every single one of them. Yet Rogal held them back, delaying them with endless energy, tactical brilliance, and unquenchable zeal. He did this for 7 years. Imagine that. To fight against the most experienced warriors the human race had ever seen, trained by the Emperor for decades, if not centuries longer than Rogal or any of his brothers. Yet Rogal Dorn had these forces at bay for over half a decade. He never tired. He never succumbed to grief. He never gave in to despair. No matter how many times he lost, no matter how many times he was pushed back. Jagatai was with him, and at points also Leman Russ, but none had the huge weight of command on their shoulders. Everything that went wrong, every defeat, every setback was laid at the feet of Rogal, yet he never once lost faith. Rogal was playing a game of chess against his brother, Horus, but Horus had 9 queens to Rogal's 2, and thrice the number of pawns, knights, bishops, and rooks. Phenomenal courage. But in all of this, where was the master of mankind? Where was the emperor, I hear you ask? Alas, the full story we cannot hope to cover here, but in brief. He had returned to Earth to create his own webway, a method of travel that would not be reliant on the warp. And that was so infested with the demons and other enemies of humanity, he was trying to secure the greatest safety of humanity and negate the need for travel via the warp, as he remembered the age of strife all night, and how warp storms had almost destroyed the human race. Thus he was attempting to create a transit system that would forever remove the need for any human to be exposed to that horrible dimension. He was building for the future, as he so trusted that Horus and his brothers would continue the Great Crusade and bring peace and freedom to humanity. He had expected the outcome to be foregone, or he would never have retreated from active leadership of the Crusade. More is the pity. It is a complicated story, which we will explore more in other notes. But Magnus, before he turned to evil, attempted to warn his father of the rebellion of Horus. But in doing so he burst the wards, the mystic psychic shields that the Emperor had erected around his palace to protect his webway project. When this happened, the warp flooded into his subrealm. The gateway to the warp that was to be the first door into his new webway was left open.
I do actually have plans for this summer, Lisa. Family stuff. You know, my stalker's probably in here, so I don't want to go too much into it. Unfortunately, I shouldn't have to worry about shit like that, but unfortunately, crazy lady kind of stalks me still. So anyway, yeah, I have beach plans for the summer. I'm hoping that'll be fun. And we'll be able to do cool stuff. What are you guys' plans? I plan to visit some haunted attractions this summer and take you guys with me. I guess attractions is the wrong word. Haunted places. Like maybe forts and stuff that are supposed to be haunted. Yeah. It'll be a
And
lot of
all of the
fun.
powers of chaos sent legion after legion of foul beings, the Neverborn, their demons, to try to crush the Emperor and use his own gateway to invade the immaterium, the real world, and of terror itself. Thus, the master of mankind had no choice but to exert all of his energy and bend all of his will and godlike psychic powers to fending off the endless tide of evil that assailed his very hearth, the palace on Terra. The majority of his bodyguard, his custodies, who were even more powerful in combat than space marines, were with him in this subrealm attempting to hold the line. Thus he could not break his concentration, his great exertion, for even an instant to assist his son, Rogal, in his labours. I will note now that there is an important figure I am leaving out of this recounting, along with many events and nuances, that of Malcador the Sigillite, but for his history again, we must wait for his own entry. He did his best to assist Rogal, but the burden of the war was not on his shoulders, and not at his command. A psyker of almost limitless power though he was not a Primarch, and could not offer Rogal the support that he most needed. So we can see that Rogal fought on. I can honestly state that there are few deeds in any mythology, fiction, or fable that can come even close to the magnitude of the bravery, tenacity, or genius exhibited by Rogal, despite it being a constant string of defeats. Those defeats exacted a tithe of blood from the traitors that they could scarce even imagine. But it got worse. Despite the pain of the rebellion to Rogal, the situation got much worse. While he tried to outthink, outmaneuver, and outgeneral a plethora of his brothers, his very rear was assailed, and the stage left Alfarius and his Alpha Legion. Alfarius and Omegon, the only twin Primarchs, had been the last to be found by the Great Crusade, and very late in the day. So much so that the Emperor left his training to Horus. So it was to Horus that they were both loyal. Alfarius and Omegon were the little brothers to all of the Primarchs. They had been found so late. As such, they could never hope to accrue the accolades and glories that others had accrued over 2 centuries or more of the Great Crusade. And what is more, the Alpha Legion under Alfarius and Omegon were very unlike the other legions. They acted subtly and with secrecy, manipulation, and guile, where most of the other legions fought directly. Many derided the Alpha Legion and their lords for being cowardly and capricious, but Alfarius gained results all right. Alas, Alfarius was to prove to be a terrible thorn in the side of the Loyalists when he finally revealed himself. His legion had been sent earlier than any other and had prepared the way. Alfarius activated sleeper units all across the Sol system and brought about pandemonium. Rogal had to contend with so much already, but ever did the sleeper units of Alfarius cause carnage, instability, and mayhem wherever they activated. More than this, they shook the very spirit of the Loyalist soldiery, for the Alphas made them question the ability of Rogal, and burned, bombed, or sabotaged where the hurt would be most. The hurt most often targeted was the very image of Rogal Dorn and his ability and his authority. It was not only that. Alfarius made it so personal. He even went so far as to inform Rogal that he had informants in the palace itself. How, you may ask? In the Investory, a huge hall in the inner sanctum of the palace, there once stood 20 statues, each a perfect likeness of the 20 Primarchs. 2 were destroyed, when the Primarchs fell from grace and their history was expunged from all record, at the command of the Emperor himself. And they are the greatest secret of the Warhammer universe. And not in 30 years has it categorically
that was a lot of
been
work.
stated what happened to
Okay.
them.
There's
Two of the statues, one being himself, Alvarius, the second being
you like those,
Dorn,
Robin?
a declaration of war, and also an attempt to unsettle and intimidate Rogal, if not the warrior within him, Dorn. But he may as well have been spitting in the wind. Rogal fought for something he could never understand, let alone appreciate. Rogal fought for a dream that clearly even baffled Alfarius. His adversaries continued to underestimate Rogal at every turn. For years. Heard Rogal to know he may even have had communication with his brother when he was already a traitor in his heart, if not by proclamation. It is a wonder that Rogal was not driven mad by the combination of grief, strain, and constant defeat. For any other Primarch, even Horus, it would have been too much. Yet Rogal stood proud. No matter the reality of the situation staring him in the face, the inevitability of his defeat, he still believed. Rogal believed that if he just held out long enough, fought hard enough, exacted enough of a blood price from the traitors, that either they would break and fall upon one another, as all traitors and the faithless always do eventually, or that more of his loyalist brothers would come to his aid in the defense of their father. Every day, he knew, was a day closer to the moment when the lion, the angel, or a boot may arrive. If he could just hold on. Nor was Rogal permitted a moment's respite.
She's not
even when there was
Robin.
a temporary break in the direct hostilities, as the traitors rallied for another sally. For in these moments he was either dealing with the actions of Alfarius, or he was performing another task he found odious in the extreme. Rogal was a master of defensive war and fortification, no matter how much Perturabo may claim otherwise. He was plying his trade to the highest level he had ever done. He dug deep. Rogal was making the Sol system a death trap of overlapping fire concentric circles of defenses. But his least favorite task was the marring of the Emperor's palace. Over centuries, the palace on Terra had been crafted into a thing of sublime beauty and a testament not only to the power of the Emperor, but the creativity, glory, and beauty possible within the heart of humanity. How Rogal hated to mar it with iron and granite and steel. Colonnades of beautiful marble were replaced with gun emplacements and death traps. Warrens of previously scintillating tessellated mosaic were replaced with traps and hard points. Rogal never betrayed his feelings to those around him, but how he must have wanted to weep for the marring of the work of thousands. The shining beacon of human endeavor that was now replaced with a glorified bunker. Finally, as the forces of Horus mustered on Alinor, Alfarius came out into the open. He had powered down a vast fleet of his ships, his men in stasis, so they could not be detected by any of Rogal's many listening outposts and scanners, and simply used the tides of space to drift him past the defenses of Rogal. He was within the net. The Alpha Legion Armada then powered up and began a raid on a fundamentally important position in the outer Sol system. On a moon of Pluto called Hydra, Alfarius was assailing the astropathic choir when he learned, to his regret, that again he had underestimated Rogal Dorn. When the fleet of traitors has simply materialized within his defenses, Dorn reacted with lightning organization and led a scrambled fleet to stop him. The traitors had intended to strike and fade, as was the way of the Alpha Legion, but Rogal Dorn was a master of void combat. at his war in space. Dorn slung-shot his reactionary fleet around multiple celestial bodies and arrived to catch Alpharius in their act. Without hesitation, Dorn assessed the situation and his fleet attacked. Rogal Dorn received reports that the traitor Primarch was personally leading a force of his elite Terminators into the very heart of the station on Hydra, and Dorn intervened. Dorn appeared and found his brother in the act of slaughtering Imperial Fist defenders. The last to be found he may have been, but he was a Primarch, and none save another Primarch could face one. So Dorn engaged him in close combat. The battle was fierce, and some say that it was only the act of an Imperial Fist grabbing the haft of the spear Alpharius had aimed at the hearts of Dorn that spared him. But the upshot was that Dorn took the strike on an unimportant segment of his body armor. Dorn, in one fluid movement, cut his brother's hands off, slashed Alpharius across the chest, then took Alpharius' spear and rammed it into him. Dorn then took his mighty chainsword, Storm's Teeth, and embedded it into Alpharius' skull, ending him instantly. The Alpha Legion retreated swiftly, and from that point on almost removed themselves from direct action, and merely provided information to Horus and the traitor command. But this was enough. Alpharius may have died in his raid, but he had discerned every last echelon of the defenses Rogal had spent years constructing, and had already sent it to the War Master. Horus would know every last hard point, every last battery, sight and sinew at the defenses of Terra and the Sol System. Dorn, the part of the man that was a demigod of battle, strategist and War Master, was the one who executed Alpharius without missing a heartbeat. Perhaps it was the months of frustration, terrorist attacks, the open challenge, the rage he could not take out on Horus and the other traitors. It was the first time Rogal Dorn had seen one of his foes in person, and the rage, built up over more than half a decade of horror, was white hot. Perhaps Rogal might have mourned his brother, but he did not get the time nor space to even consider the brother he had never spent any time with, or built any bond with. Dorn knew that Horus Lupercal was on his way, and all the legions of hell were in his wake. And this is when the heavens opened, and the sun shone. For beyond all hope, a fleet arrived in the outer system, one that was loyal. The fleet that made its way at maximum speed toward Terra, and made contact. But not any fleet, not any legion, not just any Primarch. Dorn took the notification with stern compose. Of all those who could have arrived, to Rogal, this must have been a dream come true, a balm to that so very weary soul. Of all that could have come, all that could have helped, his secret wish must have been for it to be this one. He had made it through the ruin storm. It was the Blood Angels, and on board was the one Primarch who could have made Rogal sing with joy, if that was his way. It was his beloved, most trusted, most respected brother. It was the Angel himself. At last, Sanguinius had come. Rogal was no longer alone. They would face Horus and his vile scum together. Sanguinius was here.
Yay!
When they met, it was a somber occasion, as the two other would not be possible for Dorn. But how he must have felt the weight, the burden, lift ever so slightly. For if anyone could bring hope back to the beleaguered men, women, children of Terra,
Sanguinius
of the Imperial
is here.
Fists, it was the Angel. Like a bright star he blazed, and rogal started to believe again. Just a little. Enough to go on. Enough to make those traitors pay. They may not live, they may not prevail, but with Sanguinius next to him, rogal could make a good end of it. He would fight. Even the warrior within, Dorn, must have quietly rejoiced, for none could steady the lines of the royalist armies. None other could make them believe again as well. The angel had come, and he had brought his entire legion with him. The blood angels, the warriors of the emperor's own wrath. The imperial fist would stand, but by their side would be the very manifestation of the emperor's rage. Those traitors were in for a real fight now. Perhaps long enough for the lion or the wolf or the ultramarines to arrive. Perhaps, if they fought hard enough. Just perhaps. But scant time did they have before the inevitable began anew, and their forces of the traitors were detected. The armada of the traitors reached the Sol system and went about their onward plunge towards Terra itself. All the defenses of rogal were swept away, one by one, in detail, for Horus knew of them all, thanks to Alfarius and Omegon. But despite all of the knowledge and forewarning he had, the casual raid amongst the traitor fleet was eye-watering. If anything but the Emperor himself were not the target, then the traitors would have disengaged. The rings around Terra, the loyalist navy, the batteries on Luna, and every satellite, asteroid, and everything in between was arranged by rogal Dorn to punish the rebels. And punish them it did. Nor was their advance swift. For 30 days the fleet was held at bay and cut to ribbons for its troubles. Horus and his brothers had to witness hundreds upon hundreds of their ships, a full quarter of their fleet, burned, blasted, and crushed. But on they came nonetheless. On to Terra. The moment that the traitor fleet was in range, the bombardment began. Plasma and missiles, nuclear and chemical, rained down on the Imperial Palace and the whole of Terra. The birthplace of humanity, the center of the Imperium, was hit by a deluge of mass and corruption, destruction and death. The likes had never been seen before, even during the worst years of the Unification Wars. The traitors unleashed hell and maintained this assault for days on end. Finally, when they had achieved what they set out to do, destroy as many defenses as possible, and so discord, confusion, terror, and death, did the firing cease and the landing begin. Pods. Think of a missile that strikes, and then instead of exploding, marines would run out, fill the skies, streaking towards the ground in their thousands. When this horror began, the sleeper units of Alfarius, those that were left, leapt into action and activated across the entire globe. In mere hours, the traitor marines were amongst the streets and defenses of Terra. They massed and assaulted the two spaceports closest to the Imperial Palace, the Eternity Wall and Lionsgate spaceports. Once secured, the heavens were filled
Robin,
with
send that to
transports
me
filled
so
to
I
the
can
brim
report it.
with the mortal armies of Horus. But one could
Because I
not
can't
call
do nothing
them
if I can't find
normal
it.
anymore. Forces of the traitors arrived. They again lost eye-watering large proportions of their men and material, as rogal Dorn's defenses and lasers, missiles and plasma rose up to cut them
Doing
from the
great,
skies in their
Lisa.
swathes. Debris
Doing
rained
really
across
good.
Earth, Terra, all with the blood of once loyal soldiers of the Imperium on them. but land in their millions they still did. Titans, 40 or more meter tall colossi of war, were landed as well. Much of the force then gathered before the very gates of the palace, cavorting, laughing, and in high spirits, despite the tithe exacted from them. None cared for their own dead, and all salivated at the chance to run amok in the very home of the master of mankind. Rogal and Sanguinius would hold the palace. Jagatai, that lord of fast strike and savage raid, would be deployed beyond the walls. Also, because the White Scars would not do their best work on walls or parapets. Rogal knew where to deploy his brother to the best effect, and thus he unleashed the Khan to do what he did best. Jagatai and his mighty White Scars would punish the traitors with swift strikes and undermine their deployment, harrying them well.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to call it here. I've been on for like 3 hours. I'm tired. I've got a couple of things I need to get done, and we can return to this tomorrow and pick up where we left off. I love you guys. Thank you for coming. And here's what we have so far on this one. Take care. Love you, Lisa. Love you, Robin. Y'all be good.